Chapter 2169, Son in Danger. Chapter 2169, Son in Danger. The man in azure stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He wore a domineering expression, and his eyes were slanted as he peered down at Ling Han. However, they involuntarily lit up when he swept his gaze across the Empress and the others. They were such beautiful women, and there was more than one of them. Each one of them was beautiful enough to make his heart flutter. Emperor Tears and Monarch Tears possessed extremely powerful self-control, and this was because they had a lofty ambition that they yearned to achieve. Thus, they naturally wouldn't spend too much time on trivial enjoyment. They would simply go with the flow, and they would seldom seek any pleasure. Conversely, the less talented one was, the more they would be drawn to material matters and beauty. This was because they already had no room for improvement. Thus, their only goal was to seek pleasure. This man in azure belonged to the latter group. It was thanks to luck that he had even been able to reach the dividing soul tier. In the past, he had received a 9th refinement alchemical pill from a 5-star alchemist, and it was thanks to this that he had opened the doors to the dividing soul tier. However, he was unable to advance any further. Even so, the dividing soul tier was far superior to the severing mundane tier, so this person couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction and superiority. After advancing to the dividing soul tier, countless people now had to look up to him. "Are you not going to kneel?" the man in azure chided. A cold smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He was extremely eager for Ling Han to resist, as that would give him the excuse to capture him. After all, the Dragon Universe Palace also needed to maintain its face. If word got out that he was forcefully snatching women from others, he would become the target of criticism from everyone. At that time, the Dragon Universe Palace would also be forced to expel him. In fact, he might even face severe punishment from the Dragon Universe Palace. Ling Han chuckled and asked, "You want to die?" "How audacious," the man in azure said with a frown. However, he was feeling ecstatic on the inside. "Go on, continue to seek death. You actually dare to threaten a member of the Dragon Universe Palace? You're seeking death." "Pa!" Ling Han lashed out with his palm, causing a devastating gust of wind to sweep over, instantly engulfing the man in azure. When the gust of wind passed, only a set of teeth remained, which then lightly clattered to the ground. "The consequence of not knowing how to speak," Ling Han said in a calm voice. He was well aware of the man in azure's thoughts, and it was because of this that he showed no mercy at all. The 7 guards went pale with fright. That was Lord Ming Tong, a young soul elite. Yet, he had actually been killed with a single strike. "As for you people," Ling Han swept his gaze across the 7 guards before continuing, "I'll let you off the hook this time. However, don't you dare dream about committing any more crimes in the future." With a soft clap, 7 bursts of energy instantly shot forth, crippling the cultivation of the 7 guards. A dazed expression instantly spread across the faces of the 7 guards. Without their cultivation, what else could they do? Ling Han naturally paid no heed to them. He strode toward the village. Hunyo giggled as she ran over, raising her leg to launch 7 kicks. "Pa, pa, pa." The 7 guards instantly shot into the sky and disappeared into the distance. "Remember to bring some gifts when you return," she said, placing a hand above her brows and pretending to peer into the distance. The others involuntarily smiled. Hunyo was just as mischievous as always. However, just as they were about to enter the village, they saw someone scooting out from the dense forest outside the village. They waved their arms as they ran over, shouting, "Beautiful sister." "Huh." Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. This was because the person was a woman, one that he recognized. She was none other than Chen Shuangshuang, his future daughter-in-law. What a coincidence. He had come across this girl here. Ling Han stopped, and the other women also stopped. Apart from Hunyo, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro, none of the other women were familiar with Chen Shuangshuang. Thus, Helian Xuanxue and the others all thought that this was another lover of Ling Han's. They instantly became alert. They didn't want Ling Han's love toward them to be diluted even further. "Sister." Chen Shuangshuang ran over, not caring about the fact that she was actually older than most of the women here as she referred to them as sisters. She stroked their jade-like hands, and her eyes were filled with stars. Ling Han couldn't help but find this strange. His daughter-in-law was teasing her mother-in-laws? What in the world was this? Oi, oi, oi. If you have something to say, then spit it out. Don't go around touching everyone. Also, wipe that drool from your face. Ling Han said. Chun Shuang hurriedly raised a hand to wipe the drool from the corner of her mouth. With a yelp, she then said, I almost forgot about the proper matters. Ling Han and the others couldn't help but sigh. This girl was truly a simple-minded one. She had been completely engrossed by the beautiful women around Ling Han. What proper matter? Ling Han asked with a smile. He naturally wouldn't be impatient with his daughter-in-law. His temper was as good as could be. Junior brother Ling has come across some dangers. Aren't you two distant relatives? Can you help him? Chun Shuang asked. Tongue. A burst of killing intent instantly welled up in Ling Han's heart. Who dared to target his son? Helian Xuanxue was more so filled with worry as she grabbed Chen Shuang's hands and asked, What's happened to Jianxue? Huh? Beautiful sister, you're familiar with junior brother Ling? Oh, you're all distant relatives? Chen Shuang said in curiosity. She was slightly dumbfounded at this moment. How did junior brother Ling have so many distant relatives? Moreover, they were all extremely beautiful women. Ling Han instantly felt the urge to beat someone up. Was this the time to be curious? He coughed and asked, What's happened to Jianxue? Oh. Chun Shuang finally regained her senses, and she replied, Junior brother Ling and I came out to train, and we discovered an ancient tomb nearby. We obtained a divine sword there. Yet some people from the Dragon Universe Palace also discovered the ancient tomb. They forced us to hand the sword over, yet junior brother Ling refused to. In the end, we got into a fight. Chun Shuang continued. In order to save me from an attack, junior brother Ling was struck and severely wounded. Not only that, but his wound is also laced with poison. The medicines on us are completely unable to deal with this poison. We wanted to leave, but the bastards from the Dragon Universe Palace wouldn't let us go. They continued to pursue us, all the way until here. Junior brother Ling's wounds became increasingly severe, so I came to this village with the intention of teleporting back to the sect and asking for help. However, I came across you guys. I'm afraid that junior brother Ling can't hold on for much longer. You guys are extremely powerful, so you can definitely help, right? Ling Han lifted her up, and he had already broken into a sprint. Lead the way. This was his son, so he naturally wouldn't hold back anymore. Boom! He unleashed the full power from his body as he shot forward at an incredible speed. Meanwhile, he grabbed Hun Yo and the others with his other hand, instantly leaving the small village. Chen Shuang was immediately overcome with a feeling of nausea. She felt like vomiting, yet she couldn't vomit no matter what. Only after Ling Han asked several times did she finally regain her composure and start to guide him. She was extremely stunned at this moment. Ling Han was far too quick. His speed far exceeded the limit of dividing soul tier cultivators. Do the people from the Dragon Universe Palace know that you're disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace? Ling Han asked. Otherwise, how would a measly Immortal Palace tier force dare to provoke an 8th Heaven Celestial King tier force? To Ling Han's surprise, Chen Shuang nodded and said, They know. We revealed our identity at the start, yet they still continued to pressure us and try to kill us. Ling Han instantly came to a realization. That divine sword was definitely extremely valuable, so much so that those people had decided to kill all witnesses after snatching it. He had initially thought that this was only an ordinary divine sword that was a 5-star or 6-star pseudo-celestial tool. Now, however, he had reason to believe that it had reached 7, 8, 9, or even 10 stars. The more valuable the divine sword was, the greater the danger Ling Jianxue would be in. Ling Han's speed continued to increase as he unleashed the void space and drew on the power of time. To say nothing of dividing soul tier cultivators, his speed was top-notch even among Immortal Palace tier elites. Before long, They had already arrived in another small village. However, all of the people here were cultivators. Chapter 2170, Death. Chapter 2170, Death. Damn it! The people from the Dragon Universe Palace have come over. Chen Shuangshuang immediately exclaimed. Upon hearing this, a worried expression instantly spread across Helian Xuanxua's face. Ling Han observed the surroundings with his divine sense. With a shake of his head, he said, "Don't worry, they haven't found Ling Jianxue yet." The cultivators were searching the houses in the village one by one, and this was proof that they still hadn't found Ling Jianxue yet. Helian Xuanxua felt slightly better, but she immediately looked at Ling Han and said, "Hurry, we need to think of something." Ling Han nodded and said, "I will." He let everyone down before turning to Chen Shuangshuang and asking, "How do we contact Jianxue?" "There's no way to contact him right now." Chen Shuangshuang spread her hands and said, "I promised junior brother Ling to meet him in the nearby forest in 3 days' time. If anyone else tries to meet up with him before this, he'll know that they're definitely imposters from the Dragon Universe Palace. In other words, even if I shout now, junior brother Ling will only treat it as a trap. He won't show himself." It was extremely easy for Celestials to change their external appearance, and it was only their aura that was hard to change. However, if Chen Shuangshuang simply shouted from the distance, it would be indeed impossible for Ling Jianxue to determine if it was truly her. They still needed to wait for 3 days. Ling Han suppressed his killing intent. In any case, he could observe everything happening in this small village with his divine sense. Thus, if the Dragon Universe Palace found Ling Jianxue, he could immediately charge forward and kill them, rescuing his son in the process. If they couldn't find his son, however, they would simply meet in the nearby forest in 3 days' time. With this in mind, Ling Han was finally able to calm himself down. However, his killing intent was still raging with no bounds. These people actually dared to hunt his son? They all deserved death. Ling Han wore a dark expression as he strode toward the village. The others followed behind him, and even the Empress wore an extremely cold expression. There was a murderous look in her eyes. These people dared to target members of the Ling clan? Death? When they entered the village, a young cultivator immediately leaped over to block them, saying, "This place has already been locked down. If you don't want to die, hurry up and piss off." This young cultivator was only at the Genesis tier, yet he wore an expression of extreme arrogance. When he saw the Empress and the others, an expression of greed and lust more so spread across his face. Ling Han didn't reply. Instead, he threw a simple punch. Boom! The young cultivator instantly exploded into a cloud of flesh and blood. 19th young master! The people in the surroundings yelped. Upon seeing this, they couldn't help but tremble. This young man was the 19th son of Sui Yuanliang, the palace leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. Sui Yuanliang was someone with many children, and he had a whopping 34 sons and daughters. To Celestials, this was an astonishing number of offspring. After all, the higher one's cultivation, the more introverted their essence would be. As a result, it would also be harder for them to create offspring. This was especially clear when looking at the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. After so many years, their bellies still had yet to show signs of swelling. It was abundantly clear just how difficult it was to have offspring. Anyhow, Sui Yuanliang wasn't someone who only cared about his own pleasure. He also adored all of his children, and when his 11th son had died during an adventure to an ancient site, he had killed all 9 of the accompanying disciples in a fit of rage. He was a brutal and merciless person. Now, the 19th young master had been killed before them. By failing to prevent this, it was easy to imagine just what kind of terrifying punishment they would face. Ah! Several of them screamed in terror as they turned around to flee. They completely forgot about searching for Ling Jianxue. They didn't want to die. In any case, they didn't have any family, so there was no one else they needed to worry about. That being the case, they naturally ran for their lives. Pu. However, there were several flashes of sword light, and the fleeing cultivators were instantly sliced into pieces. A middle-aged man walked out from amid the bloody sword light, a meter-long azure sword in hand. The sword was still dripping with blood. "Those who flee from battle face immediate execution," he said in a baleful voice. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han. Perhaps because of the fresh blood, or perhaps otherwise, his eyes were also tinted with a hint of blood red. This was a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. Moreover, he was at the third severance, and it was because of this that he was brimming with confidence. Ling Han was completely unfazed, and he simply threw another punch. Pong! There was no surprise as the man exploded into a cloud of flesh and blood. Ling Han didn't stop, and he continued to walk further into the village. A devastating aura suffused into the surroundings, bringing with it a raging, killing intent. Whoosh! Several people shot over from the distance, and most of them were surprisingly dividing soul-tier elites. This was a 3-star force, so they naturally weren't short on dividing soul-tier elites. In fact, the Dragon Universe Palace was an extremely powerful 3-star force. Not only did they have Immortal Palace tier elites, but Palace leader Sui Yuanliang was even a 5th secret elite. Under his command were dozens of other Immortal Palace tier elites. "Who are you?" the Ain Soul elite roared. Ling Han glanced over. Whoosh! A burst of sword light shot out from his eyes, instantly slicing the person into two. Pooh! Blood violently sprayed through the air. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace were all deeply astonished. The Ain Soul elite had failed to block a single strike from Ling Han. More precisely, he had failed to block a single glare. Ling Han continued forward. Right now, he wasn't in the mood to speak. He was in the mood to kill. Halt! Someone else jumped forward and roared. This time, it was a Heaven Soul elite. From Ling Han's previous attack, they had determined his cultivation level. He was at the Heaven Soul. Thus, Heaven Soul elites were naturally powerful enough to rival him. How audacious! You actually dared to kill disciples of the Dragon Universe Palace. You deserve death. Pooh! Ling Han threw another punch, and the Heaven Soul elite instantly transformed into a cloud of flesh and blood. What? At this moment, everyone was transfixed with shock. Weren't they both at the Heaven Soul? Why was the gulf between them so great? He's definitely a king tier from a large sect. It's because of this that he's invincible at the same cultivation level. Perhaps he's a disciple of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Don't tell me they hurried over after learning about this? Impossible. If they truly found out about this, they definitely wouldn't send just a few measly disciples. Kill them. Don't let a single one of them escape. Kill all of them. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace communicated with their divine sense, and they quickly turned their attention back to Ling Han and the others. There was killing intent burning in their eyes. What a wanton brat. You think you can act with domineering audacity just because our palace leader isn't here? An Immortal Palace tier elite said as he stepped forward. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he appeared as confident as could be. His confidence was indeed warranted. He was at the Immortal Palace tier, so he could easily crush those at the Dividing Soul tier. What did he need to worry about? Ling Han glanced at him. First secret. Die. He threw another punch, this time at the Immortal Palace tier elite. Naive brat! The Immortal Palace tier elite roared in fury. This measly Dividing Soul tier cultivator actually dared to attack him? Just how audacious was he? He also replied with a punch. Ling Han's punch transformed into a vicious tiger that bounded toward the Immortal Palace tier elite. Pong! His opponent's punch was instantly shattered. To the Immortal Palace tier elite's disbelief, the vicious tiger lunged at him with no obstruction. He immediately made a pushing motion, yet the flesh and blood on his hands and arms were immediately shredded, revealing his white bone. Then, even his bones started to shatter, reduced to nothing but ashes. However, the punch didn't stop there, and it continued to surge forth, obliterating the body of the Immortal Palace tier elite. He was reduced to nothing but bones, which were then also shattered into nothingness. This was an Immortal Palace tier elite, yet he was killed just like that. Not even a shred of him remained. A deathly silence descended over the village. This A dividing soul tier cultivator has slain an immortal palace tier elite. A dividing soul tier cultivator has slain an immortal palace tier elite. A dividing soul tier cultivator has slain an immortal palace tier elite. These words reverberated in everyone's mind, causing them to forget everything else. Chapter 2171. Heaven-defying power. Chapter 2171. Heaven-defying power. Ling Han retracted his fist. As if nothing had happened, he continued to walk forward. At this moment, no one from the Dragon Universe Palace dared to block him. They were still transfixed with extreme shock and disbelief. They were completely unable to come to their senses. A dividing soul tier cultivator had killed an immortal palace tier elite? In a single strike, no less? Fuck. Only when Ling Han had taken almost 20 steps did the members of the Dragon Universe Palace finally come to their senses. Yet again, another elite stepped forward to block Ling Han. This time, it was a third secret elite. Since a first secret elite had been killed with a single strike, sending a second secret elite out most likely wouldn't yield a good result, either. Thus, it was safer for a third secret elite to step forward. Moreover, the most powerful Dragon Universe Palace elite here was only at the third secret. If he didn't step forward, who else would? He was called Zhao Zhan, and he was an experienced Immortal Palace tier elite. He had already been at this cultivation level for over 700 billion years. He had initially been a lone cultivator before being recruited by Sui Yuanliang, and he was now the third palace leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. The palace leader was naturally Sui Yuanliang, and the second palace leader was Tang Tao, a fourth secret elite. Identify yourself, Zhao Zhan roared. Ling Han's power was far too heaven-defying, so he had no option but to take this opponent seriously. He didn't dare to view Ling Han as a dividing soul tier cultivator, even though the latter was indeed a dividing soul tier cultivator. Ling Han peered at him before throwing another punch. Boom! This punch was just as powerful and domineering as before. With a roar, Zhao Zhan unsheathed a green broadsword and slashed down at Ling Han's punch. Pung! A burst of sword light slammed into the fist. Boom! A brilliant light instantly erupted. Zhao Zhan maintained his slashing posture, yet his body was forcefully pushed back by the domineering force of Ling Han's punch. His feet carved 2 deep trenches into the ground. He was pushed back 2.5 kilometers, and he only ground to a halt after almost reaching the other side of the small village. His hands trembled violently, and he could barely maintain his grip on his broadsword. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace faltered for a moment before erupting into rapturous and deafening cheers. An elite who could block Ling Han had finally appeared. Phew! They all heaved a sigh of relief. They had almost been convinced that Ling Han could boundlessly defy the heavens and slay anyone at the Immortal Palace tier. Wah! Zhao Zhan suddenly vomited a large mouthful of blood. At the same time, his hands finally lost grip, causing his broadsword to clatter to the ground. His bloodied hands shook uncontrollably, and this was due to the formidable force of Ling Han's punch. This wasn't a great deal. However, the blood that he had vomited was truly terrifying. This was a mouthful of blood that was filled with shattered flesh. This was shattered flesh from his organs, which had been obliterated by the might of Ling Han's punch. Zhao Zhan couldn't control himself anymore, and he continued to vomit mouthful after mouthful of blood, all of which were filled with his shattered internal organs. It was as if he were about to expel all of his internal organs. He had only suffered such severe wounds because Ling Han had unleashed the regulation of slaughter. Moreover, he had unleashed this using the source power of heaven and earth. A blade of grass which had once been as ordinary as could be had managed to endure the previous generation's regulation of slaughter, thereafter becoming extraordinary. With a single shake, it could astound the heavens, shake the earth, and destroy the stars. Zhao Zhan was only an ordinary third severance elite, so how could he hope to rival this devastating might? After vomiting 100 mouthfuls of blood, Zhao Zhan violently lurched forward, collapsing to the ground. His aura vanished without a trace. He had died. He had also died. Even though Zhao Zhan had seemingly blocked Ling Han's punch, he had ultimately still fallen to this attack. Gasp! Killing a third secret elite with a single strike. Moreover, to achieve this as a measly Heaven Soul elite? How could they accept this? However, this was also Ling Han's limit. He was only able to insta-kill ordinary cultivators up to the third secret. If he wanted to insta-kill those at a higher cultivation level, he would need to unleash his trump card, the Great Clash of Source Powers. However, the members of the Dragon Universe Palace naturally didn't know this. Thus, they were filled with extreme shock and fear. Where was the limit of this Heaven Soul elite? Or perhaps he had no limit. Ling Han finally stopped, saying, "Shuang Shuang, where did you two hide before?" "In a cellar in the Heart Willow estate," Chan Shuang Shuang hurriedly replied. "Bring me over." "All right." The members of the Dragon Universe Palace could only watch on as Ling Han and the others left. They didn't dare to block them at all. Even Zhao Zhan had been insta-killed. So what difference would it make even if they all charged over? That would simply be seeking death. The Heart Willow estate was the largest structure in the entire village. It belonged to the Wenren clan, which was a rich and powerful clan of the village. Of course, the most powerful member of this powerful clan was only at the Genesis tier. After entering the Heart Willow estate, they were immediately met with resistance from members of the Heart Willow estate. However, their resistance was futile. Ling Han wasn't heavy-handed toward them, and he simply unleashed his aura, causing them to all collapse to the ground. "We hid inside the cellar the entire time, and no one discovered us," Chen Shuang said with a proud expression. This was only natural. They were both at the fourth severance, so if they were intent on concealing themselves, how could the people in the Heart Willow estate discover them? They arrived at the hiding location, yet the door to the cellar was already open. There was no one inside. Ling Han had already anticipated this. The Dragon Universe Palace had been searching the entire village, so Ling Jinxue naturally had had to change his hiding location. Otherwise, he would have been found sooner or later. Ling Han planned to use the regulations of time to replay the events of the past. It would be helpful to receive even the slightest bit of information. He channeled the source power of time, replaying the scenes from the past. A young man materialized before them, and it was as if he were genuinely standing before them. This was none other than Ling Jinxue. Ling Han involuntarily reached forward, yet his hand directly passed through Ling Jinxue's body. This was only natural as this was no more than a projection of the past. This young man's appearance was slightly similar to Ling Han's, but it was even more similar to Hellion Xuanchue's. He was lying on the ground, and it was clear that he was in a sorry state. The image didn't change much until a young man suddenly entered the cellar. A solemn expression spread across Ling Jinxue's face, and he immediately leaped up to attack. The young man retreated, yet he was no match for Ling Jinxue, being captured in a single exchange. Ling Jinxue turned around and dashed out of the cellar, disappearing into the distance. Huh, who is this person? Ling Han's divine sense was all-encompassing, and with a single wave of his hand, his origin power transformed into a hand that dragged all members of the Wenren clan over. Who's going to tell me? Who is this person? Ling Han paused the image, leaving it at the moment that the young man appeared. Lord, this is Wenren Yu, a disciple of the main branch, a middle-aged man replied. Lord, hasn't the palace leader of your esteemed sect already gone to pursue that wretched brat with our senior elder? An elder said as he looked at Ling Han. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. What's going on? Explain more clearly. Elsewhere, in a dense forest outside the small village, Ling Jinxue and Wenren Yu hid behind a tree that had already withered long ago. They held their breaths as there were people scouring around not far away. Why are you helping me? Ling Jinxue asked using his divine sense. If it weren't for Wenren Yu's warning, he definitely wouldn't have been able to escape in time. He would have been trapped in the Wenren clan, and at this moment, he would have already been captured or killed. Because I need your help, Wenren Yu replied with his divine sense. He was at the Mountain River tier, so communicating with his divine sense was naturally not a problem. Ling Jinxue was slightly astonished, and he asked, In my current state, what can I possibly help you with? I need your support so I can help my younger brother become the clan leader, Wenren Yu replied. Ling Jinxue faltered upon hearing this. However, he immediately came to a realization, and he said, "You know my true identity." Indeed, I eavesdropped on a conversation between members of the Dragon Universe Palace, and I discovered that you're a disciple of the Heavenly Saint Palace, Wenren Yu said. He didn't keep this a secret. Chapter 2172, You're Dreaming. Chapter 2172, You're Dreaming. Wenren Yu's grandfather had been the previous clan leader of the Wenren clan. He had initially wanted to pass this position to his son, yet his son had unfortunately passed away in an accident during his adventures. He only left two sons, Wenren Yu and Wenren Chuang. At that time, Wenren Yu and his brother had still been infants. Wenren Yu had been slightly older, but he had still only been 2 years old. Meanwhile, Wenren Chuang had only just been born. Initially, if Wenren Yu's grandfather had remained healthy and alive, the transition of the clan leadership would have been smooth and successful. However, that old geezer had been an adventurous person, and he had ventured deep into mountains by himself to hunt a powerful beast. In the end, he paid with his life. His death caused the main branch of the clan to become extremely weak, and the side branches of the clan seized this opportunity to snatch power. Wenren Yu and his brother were ultimately still the legitimate successors in name, and there were also some old officials who continued to support them. However, with the passing of time, the side branches gained more and more power. At the same time, more and more of the old officials were also eliminated. This side branch was represented by none other than Wenren Tang, the senior elder of the clan. Moreover, they controlled over 70% of the clan's finances. Money was naturally the most important thing to running a clan, so after taking control of the clan's finances, Wenren Tang's next step was naturally to eliminate Wenren Yu and his brother. That way, the main branch would have no more successors. At that time, the side branch could naturally assume power. After all, the clan couldn't fall apart because there were no successors from the main branch, could it? Wenren Yu was 769 years old now, and he and his brother had already experienced no fewer than 500 accidents. They would experience an accident almost once a year, and if it weren't for the help from the group of elders who were loyal to the main branch, they would have already died a long time ago. However, as Wenren Tang became increasingly powerful, the situation of Wenren Yu and his brother also became direr and direr. Many elders realized that there was no chance for these brothers to turn the tables again, so they abandoned any remaining thought of supporting the legitimate main branch. Thus, Wenren Yu had no choice but to take a gamble this time. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before he and his brother died in an accident. Ling Jinxue slowly nodded upon hearing this, saying, "If I manage to make it out alive, I'll definitely help you become the clan leader." "Not me, my brother," Wenren Yu stressed. "Why don't you want to become the clan leader?" Ling Jinxue asked in curiosity. "Because I'm more interested in cultivation," Wenren Yu replied. "I want to join the Heavenly Saint Palace." Ling Jinxue faltered slightly, and he said, "Your ambition is truly great." If Wenren Yu stayed in his clan, he could only become the leader of a small village. If he entered a large sect such as the Heavenly Saint Palace, however, he could at least become a severing mundane tier cultivator. Compared to the measly Genesis tier limit of the Wenren clan, his achievements would be countless times greater. After all, how could a Genesis tier cultivator compare to a severing mundane tier cultivator? The gulf between them was limitless. Thus, Ling Jinxue remarked that Wenren Yu's ambition was truly great. Wenren Yu remained silent, yet there was a bright glimmer in his eyes. There was also a hint of resolve. This time, he was running the risk of offending the Dragon Universe Palace. If he were caught by the Dragon Universe Palace, he and his brother would definitely be plunged into a perilous situation with no chance of escape. At that time, all of his ambitions would be void. This was called looking for riches amid great danger. Ling Jinxue nodded and said, "I'll definitely repay you for saving my life. I can personally help your brother become the clan leader of the Wenren clan. As for you wanting to enter the Heavenly Saint Palace, that will be slightly more troublesome. I can only try my best, although becoming an external disciple shouldn't be too difficult. The Heavenly Saint Palace was an 8th-heaven celestial king tier force, so there were countless people trying to do everything they could to enter. Even though Ling Jianxue had become a core disciple, he still only had the right to introduce others to become an external disciple. That's fine, Wenren said with a nod. He was confident that he could rise above the others. The two of them ceased their divine sense conversation. This was because someone had neared them, so even communicating using their divine senses wasn't safe anymore. If they were too close to others, their conversation could still be heard. Fortunately, that person only looked around for a short moment before leaving. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief. My brother and I always played hide-and-seek when we were young, so it was by coincidence that we discovered this tree, Wenren said with a slightly proud expression. Even though this tree is withered, it's quite a mysterious tree in that it can obstruct the detection of others. An expression of realization spread across Ling Jianxue's face. No wonder the cultivators from the Dragon Universe Palace always ignored this tree, even though they had already scoured this area several times. Whoosh! Two figures landed before them. One was an old man who was wearing a golden-purple crown, and one was a middle-aged man who was wearing a yellow dragon robe. The old man waved his hand, and another person instantly appeared on the ground. He had most likely been placed in a spatial god tool. Right here, the old man asked. Lord, it's this tree, the person replied as he crawled up from the ground. His hair was white, and he raised his hand to point at the tree that Ling Jianxue and Wenren were hiding in. He was none other than Wenren Tang, the senior elder of the Wenren clan. Meanwhile, the old man with the purple golden crown was Sui Yuanliang, the palace leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. The man in the yellow dragon robe was Tang Tao, the second-place leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. Ling Jianxue and Wenren instantly became as pale as a sheet. They hadn't expected that their secretive hiding spot would actually be discovered. Wenren Tang chuckled coldly in his mind. He had also only discovered Ling Jianxue's and Qin Shuangshuang's existence by chance. However, he knew that they were far more powerful than him. To say nothing of Qin Shuangshuang, even the severely wounded Ling Jianxue could easily kill him with a single strike. Thus, he headed off to notify the Dragon Universe Palace in an attempt to curry favor with them. Unexpectedly, however, Wenren had interfered and helped Ling Jianxue escape before they had arrived. As a result, he had almost been killed by Sui Yuanliang. They looked everywhere, yet they couldn't find Ling Jianxue no matter what. However, a spark came to his mind, and he suddenly thought of this place. A long time ago, he had also posed as a benevolent elder in an attempt to win the trust of the two brothers. He had wanted to obtain some secret techniques that would help him open some critical rare treasures of the clan. Moreover, he had indeed succeeded. At that time, he had also tailed the two brothers, and it was at that time that he discovered the mysterious nature of this tree. Of course, with his power, the two brothers naturally hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. It was also because of this that Wenren had the false belief that this place was definitely safe. In reality, however, this wasn't the case. Humph! Sui Yuanliang lashed out. Pa! With a single strike, the withered tree split apart. However, Ling Jianxue and Wenren were completely uninjured. This was naturally an easy feat for immortal palace tier elites. Brat, you really were hiding here, Sui Yuanliang said with a loud laugh. There was a menacing killing intent in his eyes, and he said, You actually dared to steal my cold moonlight sun sword. You're truly seeking death. Otherwise, as the true disciple of an 8th heaven celestial king tier force, how would I dare to touch you? Upon hearing this, Wenren Tang almost collapsed to the ground in fright. What? Ling Jianxue is the true disciple of a celestial king tier force? I'm done for. If Ling Jianxue dies here, will a celestial king come to flatten the Wenren clan? He had indeed been scared **. After all, how could a mighty celestial king lower themselves to the level of targeting a measly Genesis tier clan? Moreover, it was Sui Yuanliang he needed to be the wariest of at this moment. Since he was now aware of Ling Jianxue's identity, would Sui Yuanliang still let him leave alive? Now, hand over the cold moonlight sun sword. If you do, I can grant you a quick death, Sui Yuanliang said in an arrogant voice. Ling Jianxue smiled and turned to Wenren, saying, by the looks of it, I can't keep my promise. Wenren was also extremely open-minded, and he said, in any case, I failed to help you escape, so this doesn't count as breaking a promise. The two of them exchanged a glance before breaking into loud laughter. It was as if death weren't about to befall them. Brat, do you not understand? Sui Yuanliang asked with a humph. He reached over to grab at Ling Jianxue, saying, forget about it. I'll retrieve it myself. A large hand swooped over, blotting out heaven and earth. Ling Jianxue gritted his teeth. Even if he only possessed the power of an ant, he would still resist with all his might. The words, give up, didn't exist in his vocabulary. Right at this moment, however, a burst of light suddenly shot towards Sui Yuanliang's large hand. You're dreaming. Chapter 2173. He's not your father, right? Chapter 2173. He's not your father, right? Boom. Like a crashing wave, a palm strike surged over, bringing with it a terrifying might that made it seem like the heavenly fury of a great emperor. When the palm strike arrived, Sui Yuanliang's large hand was immediately crushed into oblivion. A figure immediately appeared, landing before Ling Jianxue and Wenren. This person was none other than Ling Han. His face was filled with killing intent, and his regulation of slaughter had more so become material and tangible. This regulation swarmed around his body, and it was as if it could crush heaven and earth. Sui Yuanliang had initially been calm and uncaring. Although his attack had been blocked, he naturally didn't need to unleash his full power against a measly fourth severance cultivator. Thus, this attack had utilized less than 1/10,000th of his power. As such, it wasn't surprising that Ling Han had managed to block his strike. He could tell that Ling Han's battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the fourth secret, and it had yet to reach the fifth secret. However, when Ling Han appeared before him, he couldn't maintain his composure any longer. In fact, his jaw almost dropped to the floor. Heaven Soul? Motherfucker. This person who possesses a fourth secret battle prowess is actually a Heaven Soul cultivator. How is this possible? A string of curses raced through Sui Yuanliang's mind, and he felt as if he were having a dream. Everything felt so unreal. How is it a Heaven Soul cultivator? How is this possible? The gulf between the dividing soul tier and the immortal palace tier was like the gulf between heaven and earth. Regardless of how prodigious one was, this wasn't a gulf that could be overcome. In reality, however, Ling Han had indeed blocked his strike. He possessed the battle prowess of a fourth secret elite. Old bastard, you're seeking death. Ling Han roared with raging killing intent. With a stomp, he unleashed his regulations of lightning and regulations of time in unison, arriving before Sui Yuanliang in a flash. He then clenched his fists to attack. No matter how astonished and stunned Sui Yuanliang was, he naturally wouldn't allow Ling Han to attack him at will. He hurriedly raised his right hand to block Ling Han's attack. With his reflexes as a cultivator, he could unleash a terrifying power with this hurried strike even though he was shell-shocked. Pung! Their attacks collided, and his body only leaned back a slight amount. Meanwhile, Ling Han was directly sent flying. Sure enough, his opponent only possessed a battle prowess at the fourth secret. He was no match for him. Sui Yuanliang felt slightly more confident. At the very least, he possessed a definitive advantage in terms of battle prowess. However, he still couldn't overcome the unease in his mind. This was because Ling Han was far too freakish. As a measly Heaven Soul cultivator, he actually possessed a battle prowess at the fourth secret. In fact, his battle prowess could even reach the peak stage of the fourth secret. Just what in the world was this? How could there exist such a freak in this world? Activating his void space, Ling Han instantly flashed before Sui Yuanliang again. With a turn of his hand, a wave of boundless sword chi swept forth. This was the heaven-destroying nine swords, a celestial king tier technique. Sui Yuanliang hurriedly moved to block this attack. He possessed an advantage in cultivation level, so he was able to easily block Ling Han's attack. However, he didn't relax in the slightest. Not only was Ling Han's battle prowess heaven-defying, but even his physique was utterly heaven-defying. Even though he was sent flying time and time again, he just couldn't be wounded no matter what. He continued to charge back and attack with vigor and might. This was extremely uncanny. Even though Sui Yuanliang's battle prowess was superior, he was surprisingly the one who was on the defensive. He had no option but to defend. Ling Han was far too quick, and his attacks were also far too furious. For each one of Sui Yuanliang's attacks, Ling Han could attack 5 times, or even more. Sui Yuanliang was clearly more powerful, but because of this, he had no option but to defend. He was unable to launch a counterattack. His defenses were watertight, so he wouldn't face any life-threatening danger. When his shock finally subsided, what replaced it was a feeling of incandescent rage. He, a 5th secret elite, was actually being pummeled by a measly Heaven Soul Jr. Boom! Sui Yuanliang unleashed a powerful attack, with 8 columns of azure flames erupting from his body and forming the 8 trigrams. Mythical mountain quaking fire, he roared. Numerous celestial symbols materialized, with each of them possessing a mystical ability. However, Ling Han was unfazed, and he directly soared through the flames as he threw another punch. He possessed a source power of fire, so as long as his opponent's battle prowess didn't surpass his too much, any fire element attack would be like blowing dust onto his body. It would be completely ineffective. Right now, he was as furious as could be. There was only a single thought running through his mind, and that was to pummel the bastard in front of him to death. This bastard actually wanted to kill his son. Boom! The 9 source powers of heaven and earth within him also started to seethe. As if feeling Ling Han's fury, they also unleashed the rage of heaven and earth. Sui Yuanliang couldn't help but feel shock and disbelief. His opponent was clearly a heaven soul cultivator, yet the aura that he unleashed was like that of a divine sun, the son of heaven and earth. This was an aura that couldn't be sullied. This was an aura that could only be revered. Otherwise, he would become the enemy of heaven and earth and invite great calamity. Just who in the world is this person? If his opponent were a celestial king, then so be it. Celestial kings could control the heavenly Tao, so it wouldn't be a stretch to call them a divine son, the son of heaven and earth. However, a heaven soul cultivator? Just what kind of joke was this? Ling Han's fighting spirit continued to soar without limits. At this moment, he had already forgotten about source powers of heaven and earth, power of regulations, and so on. He simply swung his fists, yearning to unleash his uncontrollable fury. It wasn't only Sui Yuanliang who was shocked into a stupor. Tang Tao, Ling Jianxue, and Wenren Yu were also transfixed with shock. It was just that Wenren Yu was too weak, and his level was too low, so he only knew that Ling Han was incredibly strong. However, he didn't understand the astonishing implication of Ling Han's strength. Meanwhile, Tang Tao and Ling Jianxue were truly stunned into silence. Which one of them didn't know about the gulf between the dividing soul tier and the immortal palace tier? Moreover, Sui Yuanliang was a 5th secret elite, so he could easily crush even 4th secret elites. Yet, he was actually unable to defeat a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. Sui Yuanliang's battle prowess was seemingly superior, yet in reality, he was the one on the back foot and being pummeled. They could see this with their own eyes, yet they were still unable to fathom and believe it. The most astonished person was Ling Jianxue. He had been brought into the celestial realm at a young age, and he had spent few years even with his mother, Helian Xuanxue, before being sent to the heavenly Saint Palace. Even so, he still had some memories of her. As for Ling Han, however, he had absolutely no impression. Thus, he naturally wouldn't think that the man who had suddenly leaped out in explosive fury out to save him was actually his father. Ling Jianxue's expression was extremely strange. Why is this freakish person helping me? Moreover, why is his expression as if his son has been beaten? Is this really necessary? He's not your father, right? Wenren Yu murmured. Because Ling Han was far too mighty, he also started to gradually relax. He started to believe that they could make it out of this dangerous situation alive. Thus, he was also in the mood to joke around. How is that possible? Ling Jinxue replied. He shook his head without hesitation. What a joke. His father was still in a small world, and even though 10,000 years had already passed, he had probably only just succeeded in opening the sky and entering the ancient realm. It was hard to say whether he had even reached the mountain river tier. It wasn't that he was belittling his father. Rather, this was decided by Ling Han's environment. It would be useless regardless of how talented he was. Cultivation naturally couldn't be without resources. Actually, you really do share some similarities with him, Wenren said. He had initially been joking, but upon closer observation of Ling Han, he became increasingly curious. Ling Jinxue shook his head, clearly refusing to believe this. Jinxue. Right at this moment, he suddenly heard a voice from behind him. Ling Jinxue's heart shuddered, and he replied without even turning around. Mother. Wenren clapped his hands and said, And you're still saying that he's not your dad? Even your mother has come. So can your father still be far away? Hunyo and the other women arrived, and Heli and Xuanxue directly rushed over to her son. Ling Jinxue wanted to move, yet he suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Junior brother Ling, don't push yourself, Chen Shuangshuang said as she rushed over. With Heli and Xuanxue on the left and her on the right, they together helped Ling Jinxue up. Mother, why have you come? Ling Jinxue asked in curiosity. However, he was feeling even more anxious. In order to obtain that sword, the Dragon Universe Palace was willing to kill everyone in their way. Ling, huh? What did you call her? Mother? Chen Shuangshuang was extremely simple-minded, and only at this moment did she suddenly notice this detail. Chapter 2174, Father. Chapter 2174, Father. Wasn't she a distant relative? How did she suddenly become his mother? Upon seeing Chen Shuangshuang, Ling Jinxue became even more anxious, saying, Senior sister, why haven't you returned to the sect? It's too dangerous here. Fuck. You've forgotten about your mother after getting a wife? After meeting her son, and with her husband to fight against the enemy, she was feeling much better than before, even though her anxiousness was yet to subside. At the very least, she was now in the mood to think about other things as well. She grabbed her son's ear and said, Good one. You're not even going to care about your mother now? Hee hee. Ling Jinxue could only chuckle foolishly. Exactly, you shouldn't be like that, Chen Shuangshuang said in concurrence. You need to worry about your mother first. Ah, damn it. Such a beautiful sister, but I have to refer to her as auntie in the future? She wore an aggrieved expression. Mucking around with beautiful women was her greatest indulgence. Yet there was actually a beautiful woman whom she couldn't refer to as sister now. This caused her to feel extremely aggrieved. Ling Jinxue also wore a gloomy expression. Why was this senior sister so airhead? Beside them, Wenren was able to understand everything, and an expression of realization spread across his face. Hang on. Who is this person? He's far too powerful. Chen Shuangshuang was extremely simple-minded, and she had already forgotten about the matters from just a moment ago. She pointed at Ling Han, and her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. A Heaven Soul Cultivator was actually battling against a 5th Secret Elite, and he was even enjoying the upper hand and pummeling the 5th Secret Elite, even though he would be sent flying each time he was hit. However, so what if he was sent flying? He wouldn't suffer any injuries, and he would immediately charge back. He was just like a god of war. He was far too freakish. I don't know either, Ling Jinxue murmured in reply. Pa. Heli and Xuanxue lightly smacked her son's head, chiding, That's your father. Pooh. Ling Jinxue and Chen Shuangshuang spluttered and choked in unison. Ha! Am I father? Ling Jinxue asked in astonishment. Isn't father still trying to open the sky in the small world? Just how prodigious is your father? He arrived at the celestial realm a long time ago, and it was only because the celestial realm was too large that he spent 10,000 years to find us, Heli and Xuanxue said with a proud expression. She harbored great reverence toward Ling Han. Ling Jianxue couldn't help but grimace. As a prodigy, he was a relatively proud person. He had once dreamed about entering the small world to help his father open the sky when he became powerful enough. Or perhaps he would leave an abundant amount of cultivation resources in the ancient realm for his father when he finally managed to open the sky, helping him soar to greater heights. Even though there were explicit rules in the celestial realm forbidding people from bringing any living things back from the ancient realm or small worlds, powerful sects could still enjoy a slight exception. They could occasionally bring a few people to the celestial realm, and no one would bat an eye. Of course, they could legitimately only do this very occasionally. Otherwise, the Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier forces would all gang up to attack them. Regardless of how powerful they were, they wouldn't be able to escape the fate of destruction. In Ling Jinshue's mind, he had only started cultivating a few dozen years later than Ling Han. However, the environment that they were in was completely different. He could receive more cultivation resources than Ling Han even dared to dream of. As such, he should have instantly surpassed Ling Han's cultivation level and left his father far behind him. However, the reality was starkly different. Not only was Ling Han's cultivation superior to his, but even his battle prowess was as mighty and domineering as the heavens. He was at the heaven soul, yet he could rival fifth secret elites. Good heavens! This is my father. Your father is truly powerful, Chun Shuangshuang murmured. She had been given a fright by Ling Han before, and now she was given another fright. Fifth secret. Ling Han's limit was actually rivaling a fifth secret elite. I know, Ling Jianxue replied in a daze. Even now, he was still unable to fathom that a dividing soul-tier cultivator could actually be this freakish. Moreover, this unbelievably freakish person was actually his father. Tang Tao looked over, and there was slight hesitation in his eyes. He was pondering whether he should target Ling Jianxue and the others or not. Initially, this wouldn't have been a problem. They were only juniors at the dividing soul tier and severing mundane tier, so as a fourth secret elite, he could have easily captured them with a single wave of his hand. Now, however, he was apprehensive of Ling Han. Could Sui Yuanliang defeat Ling Han? This was impossible. Even if Ling Han was unable to suppress Sui Yuanliang, if he wanted to leave, who could stop him? Moreover, once Ling Han left, news of them hunting disciples of the heavenly Saint Palace would definitely get out. When a celestial king was enraged, even heaven and earth would change color. Right now, they were facing an eighth heaven celestial king. The Dragon Universe Palace was definitely done for. That being the case, why would he still stay in the Dragon Universe Palace? Even though he was the second palace leader, in reality, his relationship with Sui Yuanliang was only one of partnership and mutual utilization. How could he die for Sui Yuanliang? With this in mind, he immediately made a decision. He directly turned around to leave, as carefree and casual as could be. Tang Tao! Sui Yuanliang roared in rage. However, Tang Tao didn't as much as pause, instantly disappearing into the dense forest and vanishing without a trace. He only knew that Sui Yuanliang viewed the cold moonlight sun sword with great importance. However, as for its explicit use, Sui Yuanliang hadn't revealed even the slightest bit of information. Yet, he still wanted him to fight with his life? What a joke. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue, Chen Shuangshuang, and Wenren Yu went numb in the head when they saw this. They knew that Tang Tao had fled because of Ling Han. That was a fourth secret elite. Elsewhere, Wenren Tang was trembling in fear. He discovered that he had ridden on the wrong coattail. Heavens! Not only was Ling Jianxue the disciple of an eighth heaven celestial king tier force, but he was more so the son of that freakishly powerful person. And to think that Wenren Tang had actually sold out Ling Jianxue, could he still live? Wenren Tang collapsed to the ground, and he felt his ambitions for power slowly draining away from him. Right now, he only wanted to live a calm and peaceful life. Immediately after Tang Tao left, many other members of the Dragon Universe Palace hurried over. Palace leader, the 19th young master, was killed by this person. Elder Changqing was also killed. The third palace leader was also killed. They reported these pieces of news one by one, all of them incriminating Ling Han. Sui Yuanliang was also angered upon hearing this. I haven't even killed your son yet you've already killed my son and the third palace leader, and you're acting as if you're the victim? Brat, I'm going to destroy you, he howled. With a wave of his right hand, he retrieved a damaged piece of paper. This was a burnt piece of paper, and only less than half of it remained. However, once it appeared, it radiated with an overwhelming might that could suppress the heavens. It was like a celestial king-tier decree that could command the heavens. Suppress him, Sui Yuanliang roared, an expression of reluctance on his face. He had obtained this decree by luck, and it was more so a damaged decree. Once it was used, it was very likely that it couldn't be used again. However, if he didn't kill Ling Han, it would be impossible for him to keep secret his actions of hunting the disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace. At that time, when the Dragon Universe Palace was destroyed, he would also be killed. Thus, what use would this treasure be, regardless of how powerful it was? In any case, he was dead set on obtaining the Cold Moonlight Sun Sword. Meanwhile, Ling Han had reached a key barrier. Under the influence of his rage, he had forgotten everything and only had thoughts of battle. This state had allowed him to gradually cultivate a fist technique. This couldn't be regarded as a secret technique per se, as it was only a form of willpower and aura. Regardless of what obstacles lay ahead, he would obliterate them all with his fist. However, Ling Han had a nagging feeling that he was still missing something that would unleash the true might of this fist technique. Only when the piece of damaged paper appeared did a cold chill suddenly run down his spine, causing him to come to a sudden realization. He was missing the threatening pressure of life and death. His physique was far too powerful. This was a good thing, but because he didn't need to worry about life and death, it meant that he couldn't appreciate the pressure and intensity of battle. When these feelings finally arose, he instantly attained enlightenment. Boom! He threw a punch, causing violent flames to billow through the air. Chapter 2175, Betrayal of the Decree. Chapter 2175, Betrayal of the Decree. Pung! Meanwhile, Sui Yuanliang was still activating the piece of damaged paper. This piece of damaged paper was far too high in level, so it was crucial for him to be extremely careful. Otherwise, he might even suppress himself. However, Ling Han's punch brought with it an invincible willpower. This punch was far too terrifying, and he felt as if it were impossible to block and evade. In the next instant, the punch landed, striking his lower abdomen and causing him to instantly curl over in pain. He felt as if he were about to vomit all of his internal organs, and his activation of his secret technique was immediately stopped. He was absolutely astounded. In reality, the might of this punch wasn't that powerful at all. However, the willpower that was imbued within it was far too powerful, so much so that it was surprisingly able to suppress his divine sense. He was unable to muster any thought of resistance. If it weren't for his strong desire to live, allowing him to forcefully activate a barrier of defenses, he would have perhaps been killed by that punch. He was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, so why did he possess such powerful willpower? It was as if he represented the heavens. Sui Yuanliang naturally didn't know that Ling Han possessed 9 source powers of heaven and earth, all of which had been utilized in this punch. Those were source powers of heaven and earth. These were matters at the Celestial King tier, so they could naturally suppress those at the Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han suddenly let out a loud laugh. Unleashing this punch made him experience a great sense of satisfaction. This was a fist technique that he had created, and it was also the Tao that suited him the most. Even though the might of this fist technique wasn't especially great at this moment, it was, after all, a technique that had yet to be perfected. Moreover, his cultivation level was also too low, so there was still much room for refinement and improvement. Indeed, the might of this fist technique was inferior to that of the Great Clash of Source Powers, but its advantage was that it could be easily controlled. This was unlike the Great Clash of Source Powers, which Ling Han could only unleash. After unleashing it, however, it would completely break free from his control. Uncontrollable powers were especially dangerous, even to their owners. Only the Tao that belongs to me can become the most powerful fist technique. I'll call this the Fists of Fury. With a roar, Ling Han unleashed an endless flurry of punches, all of which were unleashed through the Fists of Fury. They could attack one's mind, punish one's body, and destroy all matter. At this moment, he attained enlightenment. When this fist technique was perfected, its might would definitely be no weaker than that of the great clash of source powers. Moreover, once he reached the Celestial King tier, the great clash of source powers would be limited by the might of the source powers of heaven and earth. However, the Fists of Fury would be different. They would only be limited by his cultivation level. The more powerful he became, the more powerful the Fists of Fury would become. Die! He swung his fists, and because his raw power had already reached the ascending origin tier, his fists were able to punch at an astonishing speed. Even Sui Yuanliang was unable to block them all in time. He felt as if his vision was drowned out by flying fists. Pong, 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 pong. Ling Han's Fists of Fury smashed down like rain, forcing Sui Yuanliang to retreat time and time again. Sui Yuanliang's blood churned, and he felt as miserable and pained as could be. He was beside himself with shock. Ling Han had clearly only possessed a battle prowess at the peak stage of the fourth secret, yet he had suddenly soared to a new height, with his battle prowess reaching the fifth secret. Ling Han now genuinely possessed the ability to threaten his life. Is this brat on drugs? No, no, no. He's been on drugs this entire time. Otherwise, how can a measly heaven soul cultivator rival a fifth secret elite? It was just that he was too drugged up right now, so much so that even a fifth secret elite such as Sui Yuanliang was facing life-threatening danger. You dare to hunt my son? You're seeking death. Not only had Ling Han's fury not subsided, but it had become even more intense. Ling Han had always felt slightly apologetic to Ling Jianxue. He felt like he hadn't been able to accompany and raise his son, making him an irresponsible father. Just when he was about to find his son to make up for this, he discovered that someone was actually trying to kill the latter. Moreover, they had almost succeeded. How could Ling Han not be furious? "I'll kill you, bastard!" he roared in rage. Sui Yuanliang felt extremely aggrieved. Your son is only severely wounded and poisoned. But what about me? My son has genuinely been killed. Whom can I complain to? However, Ling Han was far too powerful enough to make him shiver in fear. Thus, his fighting spirit naturally receded like a falling tide. Friend, since your son isn't in any danger, why don't we shake hands and make peace? I'm willing to compensate you. When Sui Yuanliang said this, there was a burning sensation on his face. He wanted to dig himself a hole to hide in. This was far too humiliating. His treasure had been stolen, and his son had been killed, yet he was actively asking for peace. Moreover, he was even offering to compensate his opponent. This was unfathomable. No need, Ling Han said in a cold voice, rejecting his offer. This person wanted to kill his son, so could he let this slide with some mere compensation? If Sui Yuanliang genuinely wanted to compensate him, he could compensate with his worthless life. Friend, don't take things too far. Otherwise, the only result will be a lose-lose situation. In fact, it might even lead to mutual death. Sui Yuanliang howled. Only you will die, Ling Han said, his fists not slowing down one iota. Sui Yuanliang roared in fury, yet he was struck time and time again, which caused his flesh to fracture and split. His aura also fell significantly. A resolute expression flashed across his eyes. If this continued, he might genuinely be pummeled to death by Ling Han. How detestable. He clearly possessed a powerful decree, one which could suppress any immortal palace tier elite once it was activated. However, under Ling Han's furious and unrelenting attacks, he was unable to find any time to unleash this trump card. Fine, since you're forcing me, I'll let you taste the evil fruits of your decision. Sui Yuanliang finally decided to go all out. His body shuddered violently, unleashing orbs of black air that appeared indescribably sinister. Ling Han had already been filled with killing intent, and this sight only made him even more enraged. You actually defected to the force of darkness. You truly deserve death. This sinister aura was none other than the unique characteristic of the other cultivation system. It was something that neither heaven nor earth could tolerate. Naive brat, what do you understand? Sui Yuanliang sneered. Those who win are righteous, and those who lose are wrong. This world is destined to be conquered, and only the revered deities can remain undying. Moreover, the deities will bestow us with true immortality. This heaven and earth possesses a mortal's tribulation, but if the deities gain control, they'll erase this immortal's tribulation. At that time, everyone can enjoy immortality. You stupid fool, the heavenly Tao is the true killer. He spoke with conviction and righteousness, and it was clear that these beliefs were already deeply ingrained in his mind. He had been completely brainwashed by the force of darkness. Then I'll kill you in the name of this heaven and earth, Ling Han said with a humph. Before his son, these matters were all of lesser importance. What did it matter if the man practiced the cultivation system of darkness or whatnot? Since he dared to hunt his son, Ling Han would kill him no matter what. In a fit of chaotic rage, Ling Han unleashed his full battle prowess. However, after unleashing the power of darkness, Sui Yuanliang also became significantly more powerful. This was even though he was now detested by heaven and earth, meaning that he was unable to wield the power of regulations. However, this didn't weaken his battle prowess in the slightest. This was reflected by his astonishing recovery ability, and it was as if he possessed an indestructible physique. He instantly regained equal footing with Ling Han. Ha ha ha, I'll send you on your way, Sui Yuanliang said with laughter. His entire body was enveloped in black mist, and he started to activate the Celestial King Tier decree in his hand. Even though it was damaged, it was still powerful enough to kill any Immortal Palace Tier elite. Ling Han only possessed a battle prowess at the 4th secret to 5th secret, so he was naturally unable to rival the power of this decree. Wang, the piece of damaged paper lit up, unleashing a devastating aura. This was the mighty power of a celestial king. Brat die. Sui Yuanliang shook the decree, and he was just about to unleash the celestial king power to smash Ling Han into smithereens. Whoosh! A ray of light burst forth from the decree, yet right after soaring out, it made an unfathomable turn and slashed back towards Sui Yuanliang. What? Sui Yuanliang coughed a mouthful of blood in shock. Why was the decree turning around to attack him instead? A ray of light flashed past, causing Sui Yuanliang to instantly stop all of his movements. He could only stare at Ling Han in a daze, and there was still an expression of disbelief frozen on his face. Why had the Celestial King Tier decree suddenly betrayed him? Fuck. Chapter 2176, Lady Wenren? Chapter 2176, Lady Wenren? Ling Han was confused at first, but he quickly came to a realization. After unleashing the power of darkness, Sui Yuanliang had already become the enemy of this heaven and earth. Meanwhile, the Celestial King Tier power had represented this heaven and earth, so after being activated, whom would it attack? In other words, Sui Yuanliang had been seeking death. You've inflicted this fate upon yourselves, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He hadn't imagined that Sui Yuanliang would actually die by his own hands. Even he felt slightly dissatisfied by this conclusion. He lashed out without mercy, killing all of the remaining disciples from the Dragon Universe Palace. Father! Ling Jinxue called. He was slightly dazed as he gazed at his father, and his colorful imaginations of Ling Han naturally crumbled into ashes. Right now, he had to accept this mighty and powerful father. Ling Han dashed over, pulling his son into a tight embrace. Ling Jinxue was slightly flustered. He had never been embraced by a man before, especially a man he had just met. However, after a short while, he immediately felt the deep emotions of Ling Han's embrace. Tears involuntarily welled up in his eyes. Father, he called again. His voice was filled with emotion and admiration. Ever since he could remember things, he had never met Ling Han. His only impression of Ling Han was created through the descriptions given by Helian Xuanxue. He had once grumbled, he had once been confused, and he had once felt aggrieved. However, after beginning to cultivate, he had buried all of these emotions deep in his heart. At this moment, a feeling of familial affection finally erupted without restraint. Ling Han lightly patted Ling Jinshue's back. At the same time, he channeled the source power of wood, helping his son expel the poison from his body. This was naturally an easy task. Ling Jinshue had only been wounded by a dividing soul tier cultivator, so his wounds naturally wouldn't pose much challenge to Ling Han. Moreover, Ling Han could utilize his source powers of heaven and earth, so it wasn't long before he expelled all of the poison from his son's body and healed all of his wounds. However, Ling Jianxue had suffered severe wounds, after all, so he wouldn't be able to fully recover in such a short period of time. "Let's go to my place first," Wenren said, interrupting at just the right moment. His suggestion naturally won everyone's approval. They all returned to the Wenren clan. As for Wenren Tang, no one paid any heed to him. They didn't even spare him as much as a glance. How could Ling Han, the Empress, and the others pay any heed to such a measly person? Meanwhile, Wenren felt it beneath him to deal with such matters. He had made the right move and taken the right gamble, and this had allowed him to instantly turn the tables. After arriving at the Wenren clan, Wenren arranged their living quarters. Meanwhile, the disciples of the Dragon Universe Palace were all captured by Ling Han. With him using his divine sense to observe the surroundings, these people were naturally unable to flee. Those who deserved death were killed, and those who deserved punishment had their cultivation crippled. Ling Han wasn't a bloodthirsty person. He understood how to act with reason. With their support, Wenren Shuang naturally inherited the position of clan leader without any problem. In fact, Ling Han even gifted him several alchemical pills, helping him directly reach the Genesis tier. However, this also came with a side effect. That was, Wenren Shuang was now stripped of any chance of improvement. He could only stay at the Genesis tier forever. To Wenren Shuang, however, this was already good enough. This was because with his cultivation talent, it had almost been impossible for him to reach the Genesis tier in the first place. Wenren was extremely intelligent, and he immediately organized an inheritance ceremony for his younger brother. At the same time, he invited Ling Han and the others to attend this ceremony. He believed that after doing this, the nearby forces most likely wouldn't dare to target the Wenren clan in the future. Because he was afraid of the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han put on some disguise. Otherwise, when he arrived at the Heavenly Saint Palace, perhaps the people from the Four Seas Palace would already be waiting for him there. Huh? Where's Wenren? The ceremony was about to begin, yet Wenren surprisingly had yet to arrive. Ling Jinshue couldn't help but find this strange. A mysterious smile spread across Wenren Shuang's face, and he said, "Brother Jinshue, you'll find out soon." "How mysterious. What in the world are you playing at?" Ling Jinshue murmured. He had been recuperating in the Black Tower for the past few days, which was equivalent to thousands of years in the Black Tower. Thus, he had naturally made a full recovery already. He had severed heaven and earth when advancing to the severing mundane tier, yet he had also ground to a halt after reaching the fourth severance. With Ling Han's abundant amount of cultivation resources, he now had hopes of reaching the fifth severance. At this moment, a beautiful woman walked over and stopped behind Ling Jinshue. Ling Jinshue didn't pay any attention at first, yet the woman surprisingly didn't leave after stopping behind him. He found this especially strange, and he couldn't help but turn around and ask, "Miss, why are you standing behind me?" The woman clasped her hands behind her back with a smile and said, "Brother Jinshue, is this your attitude towards someone who shared adversity with you?" Huh, this voice is so familiar. Ling Jinshue was slightly dazed as he stared at her. After a moment, he suddenly exclaimed, "Why, you're Wenren." "It's Wenren, not Wenren," the woman said with a smile. "In the past, my brother was too young and was unable to deal with clan matters, So the elders in the clan disguised me as a male so that I could support the hope of the main branch of the clan. After so long, I've almost forgotten that I'm a female as well. Ling Jinxue couldn't help but feel respect. For the sake of her brother and clan, this woman had made such a huge sacrifice. She was deserving of his respect. Lady Wenren, I'm impressed, he said with sincerity. Wenren Yu smiled and said, call me by my name. I can also call you by your name, right? Indeed, Ling Jinxue replied. He didn't think much about this. Not far away, Ling Han and Helian Xuanxue were far more understanding of this exchange. This girl has feelings for Jinxue, Helian Xuanxue said with a slightly proud expression. Her son was well received by women, so she was naturally overjoyed as well. But doesn't Jinxue like Shuang? Now that another person has suddenly appeared, will it cause trouble? Zhu Xin'er asked. They had all heard Ling Han talking about how Ling Jinxue was head over heels for Qin Shuang. Ling Han pondered for a moment before smilingly saying, it's no problem. Let the two of them grow closer, and this will also stimulate that girl. She's always so airhead. So isn't she delaying the fourth generation of the Ling clan? However, the Empress, Li Sichuan, and the others didn't think that the airhead Qin Shuang would understand the situation. After all, hadn't the granddaughter of Celestial King Jiahua pursued Ling Jinxue before as well? Why hadn't that girl shown any signs of jealousy? Perhaps she hadn't been stimulated enough? Ling Han pondered this. However, he didn't want to expose this in a forthright manner. Instead, he wanted Chen Shuang to discover this by herself. After Wenren Shuang became the clan leader, many people came to offer their congratulations. They all heard that the Dragon Universe Palace had been destroyed, and they naturally attributed this to elites from the Heavenly Saint Palace. Thus, they naturally didn't dare to underestimate the Wenren clan. This allowed the Wenren clan to feel extremely proud from top to bottom. Their new clan leader had only just ascended this position, and there were already so many powerful clans coming over to congratulate them. In the future, their development would naturally be smooth as well. Prosperity was just around the corner. After dealing with all the other matters, Ling Han waved his hand and set off with everyone else for the Heavenly Saint Palace. Wenren Yu naturally set off with them as well. She had made a promise with Ling Jinxue, so she would also join the Heavenly Saint Palace and become an external disciple. Father, this is the Cold Moonlight Sun Sword, Ling Jinxue said as he retrieved a sword, handing it over to Ling Han. Ling Han accepted it and held the sword hilt in his right hand. Meanwhile, he used his left hand to lightly stroke the blade of the sword. He was slightly curious. This was a sword that Sui Yuanliang had been intent on obtaining, even if that meant offending the Heavenly Saint Palace. Just what was so special about it? Wang. His hand stroked the blade, causing it to lightly shudder. It was as if the sword were murmuring. This sword is extraordinary. However, perhaps only Sui Yuanliang knew its history, Ling Han said. He retrieved Sui Yuanliang's spatial god tool, saying, let's look through his belongings. Perhaps we can find some information. Chapter 2177, Great Reversing Yin and Yang. Chapter 2177, Great Reversing Yin and Yang. Ling Han entered the Black Tower, where time flowed 100,000 times faster than in the outside world. In just a few hours of real time in the outside world, he had already examined all of the information left by Sui Yuanliang. Because Sui Yuanliang hadn't anticipated facing any dangers, he had indeed left a lot of clues in his spatial god tool. Great Reversing Celestial King. Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword. Great Reversing Celestial Technique, Ling Han murmured to himself. When he opened his eyes again, he had already grasped all of Sui Yuanliang's knowledge. As it turns out, this is actually a 7-star pseudo-celestial tool and the secondary sword to the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword, Ling Han explained to his lovers and son. However, being a 7-star pseudo-celestial tool isn't the most impressive thing about this sword. Instead, one can use this sword to find the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword. Moreover, the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword is a celestial tool, and even the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Technique, the Great Reversing Celestial King's cultivation technique, is sealed inside this sword. What kind of existence was the great reversing celestial king? The empress asked. Both might be celestial kings, but how could a fifth heaven celestial king compare to a ninth heaven celestial king? Their standard was extremely high now, so those under the fifth heaven, sixth heaven, or even seventh heaven wouldn't be viewed very highly by them. Only those at the eighth heaven or ninth heaven could be regarded as freakish. Ling Han paused for a moment before saying, I should probably start from the beginning. The great reversing celestial king is someone with many stories. If one wants to become a celestial king, they definitely need to possess immense talent. After all, even king tiers are unable to become celestial kings. However, there are always exceptions in this world. During his earlier years, the great reversing celestial king only possessed ordinary talent, and no one believed that he could reach the severing mundane tier. However, even though he stumbled and struggled, he still managed to ascend to the severing mundane tier. Afterward, no one believed that he could reach the fifth severance, yet after obtaining a rare treasure, he was able to complete this feat. In summary, he struggled through each cultivation level, but he was always able to come across great fortune, allowing him to reach perfection in each cultivation level. Those of the same generation as him were either far superior in cultivation level, or they died after failing to resist their immortal's tribulation. However, he was always able to just barely break through when the immortal's tribulation started to threaten his life. Interestingly, his bumpy path didn't stop him from becoming a celestial king. Moreover, he became a ninth heaven celestial king. In the beginning, the great reversing celestial king wasn't prominent among the celestial kings. However, after creating the great reversing cultivation technique, he came from behind to surpass all others, becoming the ruler of heaven and earth in that generation. But Ling Han's expression suddenly became strange. But what? The others all asked in curiosity. But the great reversing celestial king eventually became a woman, Ling Han revealed. What do you mean? The others asked in confusion. The great reversing celestial king had originally been a man, yet he always believed that he should have been a woman. However, even though celestials can transform their bodies, they're unable to genuinely reverse yin and yang. Yet, the great reversing celestial technique that he created could reverse yin and yang, ultimately allowing him to become a woman. He became a genuine woman, Ling Han said in a leisurely voice. Everyone was astonished. Something like this was possible? The great reversing yin and yang sword also possesses this ability. For those who are struck by this sword, men will become women and women will become men. However, since they haven't genuinely practiced the great reversing yin and yang cultivation technique, this transformation will only last for a limited time, Ling Han said. So fun, so fun. Hunyo said as she clapped her hands. Nyo wants this sword. After hearing this story, it was clear that the great reversing celestial king was genuinely an extremely interesting person. Heh. Ling Han tossed the cold moonlight sun sword to his son, saying, Since you obtained this sword, it's up to you whether you obtain the great reversing celestial king's cultivation technique and divine sword or not. Ling Jinxue accepted the sword and placed it in his spatial god tool with a nod, saying, I'll decide when I have the chance. Using the transference portals, they then set off for the Heavenly Saint Palace. After arriving at Red Blossom Village, Ling Han drew all of his lovers into the Black Tower. He was going to become a student to learn that omnipresent technique, and his goal was extremely clear. Thus, it was better for his lovers to cultivate in the Black Tower. Because of this, only 4 people remained when they arrived before the Heavenly Saint Palace: Ling Han, Ling Jinxue, Qin Shuangshuang, and Wenren. From the foot of the mountain up, everything belonged to the Heavenly Saint Palace. Outsiders were strictly forbidden from entering, and there was a gigantic formation enveloping the entire sect. From the outside, one could only see a hazy mountain range that was hidden amid clouds and mists. Nothing could be seen clearly. If one possessed a token of the Heavenly Saint Palace, they could ignore this formation and directly fly inside. If one tried to forcefully barge in without a token, they would be immediately crushed by the might of the formation. Of course, this was unless one was as powerful as a celestial king. Thus, if outsiders wanted to enter the heavenly Saint Palace, they had to pass through the large gates at the foot of the mountain. There were people standing guard here, and only those who were granted permission could enter. Initially, Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jianxue could have entered without any problems. However, because there were two outsiders in Ling Han and Wenren, they didn't enter the sect directly. Instead, they went to the large gates together. Our respects to senior sister Qian and senior brother Ling. The four disciples guarding the gate bowed and spoke in greeting when they saw Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jianxue. All four of them were at the severing mundane tier. However, they were only at the first severance. Moreover, they were all far older than Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jianxue. They had reached the severing mundane tier earlier, but because they weren't talented, they were still unable to take that next step. Thus, they could only remain external disciples who guarded the gate. When they saw core disciples such as Qin Shuangshuang and Ling Jianxue, they naturally had to pay their respects. What was important in the sect wasn't age. Rather, it was strength and talent. Ling Jianxue nodded in acknowledgement. He then pointed at Ling Han and Wenren and said, "These two are potential talents that senior sister Chun and I discovered during our adventures. We especially brought them back to introduce to the sect, so help them get registered." Understood, the four external disciples said with a nod. There was indeed such a tradition in the sect. Whenever disciples went out to adventure and train, they would keep an eye out for cultivation talents to bring back and examine. If they passed the examinations, they would be accepted into the sect. If they didn't pass, however, they would naturally be sent back wherever they came from. In reality, most disciples had joined like this. In fact, some disciples had even been personally recruited by the elders and protectors of the sect. For example, there might be a cultivation ceremony in some place, and those who managed to shine would be recruited by all kinds of powerful sections. If they didn't send elders, protectors, or ascending origin tier elites and celestial kings, how could they possibly snatch these outstanding talents? After registering their information, Ling Han and Wenren were easily let through by the four external disciples. In any case, the following examinations wouldn't be their responsibility. They had already finished their job. Ling Han and the others entered the sect, only to see a winding, serpentine mountain path. On the sides of this path were dense bushes consisting of flowers and peculiar plants that were radiating with a divine glow. In the distance, there were also many pagodas and abodes that were faintly discernible. Sitting atop the mountain, it was as if they were hovering in the air. This was much like a celestial abode. Junior sister Chun. Immediately upon entering, they saw a young man arriving on a sword. He was wearing an azure robe, and his appearance was relatively handsome. Senior brother Wang, Qin Shuangshuang said in greeting. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue seemed slightly displeased, and he pursed his lips as he also greeted senior brother Wang. Ling Han immediately understood the situation. This senior brother Wang was definitely his son's rival in love. Even though Ling Han had no animosity with this senior brother Wang, who told him to fight for his future daughter-in-law, he definitely had to help his son. Only at this moment did this senior brother Wang shoot a sideways glance at Ling Jianxue, saying, "Oh, so junior brother Ling is also here. I didn't know that you had already been released by Grand Elder Jihua." Heh. His act of provocation was as clear as could be. Chapter 2178. Innumerable Love Rivals. Chapter 2178. Innumerable Love Rivals. This senior brother Wang was called Wang Liangchun, and he had entered the heavenly Saint Palace earlier than Ling Jianxue and Qin Shuangshuang. He had also reached the fourth severance before them, and right now, he was cultivating toward the dividing soul tier. Once he reached this cultivation, even though he would still be a core disciple, his status would definitely rise by a significant amount. Qin Shuangshuang was a renowned beauty of the heavenly Saint Palace, so even though she was airhead, and even though she had a strange hobby of being attracted to beautiful women, her beauty and cultivation talent were still able to win her many admirers. Wang Liangchun was one of them. "Heh, no need for senior brother Wang to worry," Ling Jianxue said in an emotionless voice. Since he knew that Wang Liangchun was a rival in love, he would naturally treat him with hostility. Wang Liangchun wore a faint smile and said, "Oh, that's right. Lady Tu-san is looking for junior brother Ling everywhere again. Ling Jinxue frowned upon hearing this. Lady Tu-san was called Tu Hongying, and she was the granddaughter of Celestial King Zhuhua. For some reason, she had fallen in love with him at first sight. Moreover, she had loudly claimed that she would marry no one but him. This matter had startled even Celestial King Zhuhua, and he had even locked Ling Jinxue up in an attempt to make him yield. However, after 10,000 years, Ling Jinxue had still been resolute and unwilling to give in. In the end, Celestial King Zhuhua could only free him in exasperation. After all, he was a core disciple of the sect, and he hadn't committed any crimes, had he? Because of this, Celestial King Zhuhua ended up becoming extremely appreciative of Ling Jinxue. He believed that this young man was true to his heart, and he wouldn't give in to external forces. He was someone who could achieve greatness. As such, he encouraged Tu Hongying to continue pursuing him. That's right. What's wrong with Lady Tu-san? Junior brother, why can't you accept her feelings? Chen Shuangshuang said in agreement. At this moment, Ling Jinxue truly wanted to vomit blood. In front of this airhead, his heart truly ached. He didn't want to speak. However, even though he didn't speak, Ling Han naturally wouldn't ignore this. He patted Wang Liangchuan's shoulder and said, "Senior brother Wang, right? Come, take me on a tour." As he said this, he forcefully dragged Wang Liangchun away. Wang Liangchun couldn't help but feel astounded. He was at the peak stage of the fourth severance, and he had even reached the barrier to the Yang Soul. Once he opened his Yang Soul, he was confident that he could definitely advance. However, before Ling Han, his strength was seemingly non-existent. Ling Han had easily patted his shoulder, and he had easily managed to drag him away. He couldn't resist at all. He looked at Ling Han, yet he couldn't discern his cultivation level no matter what. He felt like Ling Han was a towering mountain, a boundless sea, profound and unfathomable. Ling Han dragged Wang Liangchun away, saying that he wanted a tour of the sect. In reality, however, it was he who was dragging Wang Liangchun around. Only after several hours did he return to look for Ling Jinxue. However, he knew that such kind of help could only be used once. In the future, it was still up to Ling Jinxue himself. By the looks of it, he needed to give his son some special training. Once they returned, Ling Jinxue immediately brought Ling Han and Wenren to the Great Hall of the sect. This was where outsiders would have their cultivation talent and comprehension ability examined. Those who passed the examination could remain, while those who failed could only piss off. Wenren, an elder responsible for the examination, shouted. He was an Immortal Palace tier elite. As expected of an 8th Heaven Celestial King tier force, even Immortal Palace tier elites had to lower themselves to such lowly tasks. If this were outside, Immortal Palace tier elites were powerful enough to found their own sects and become the ruler of a land. Wenren Tang was just about to walk over, yet 3 men coincidentally entered the hall at this moment. The man in front wore a bright and colorful robe, and he radiated with an aura of elegance and nobility. The 2 men following him were also dressed with dignity, and they also radiated with astonishing auras. However, it was surprising that the man in front was only at the 4th severance, while the 2 men behind him were at the Earth Soul. The weaker person is actually their leader. By the looks of it, this person definitely has a powerful background. Otherwise, how can he command 2 Earth Soul cultivators? Oh, it's young Master Da, the Immortal Palace tier elder exclaimed. To Ling Han's surprise, he also stood up to bow slightly at the 4th severance cultivator. His background was truly powerful. At the very least, even Immortal Palace tier elites didn't dare to offend him. Young Master Da wore an expression of disdain, and when he swept his gaze across Ling Jinxue, he said, "Lord Duan, aren't you aware that the sect examination rules have already changed?" What change? The Immortal Palace tier elite wore a confused expression. He had always been responsible for these examinations, so if there were any changes, how could he not be aware? You should head over there, young Master Da said as he pointed at a nearby column. The Immortal Palace tier elite opened his mouth slightly. He instantly came to a realization. Young Master Da was purposefully making things difficult for him. Sure enough, the rumors weren't false. Young Master Da was currently pursuing Lady Tu San. Yet Lady Tu San was head over heels in love with Ling Jianxue. This was something that everyone in the heavenly Saint Palace knew. Thus, young Master Da was naturally extremely jealous, so he wanted to target Ling Jianxue everywhere that he could. However, even though young Master Da was also the descendant of a celestial king, because they were in the same sect, and because Ling Jianxue was held in high regard by celestial King Zhuhua, young Master Da naturally didn't dare to take things too far. However, making things difficult for those that Ling Jianxue had brought into the sect was definitely no trouble at all. Lord Duan had initially planned to examine Ling Han and Wenren using the examination for external disciples. However, the examination that young Master Da pointed at was the examination for true disciples. These examinations were as different as heaven and earth. In the heavenly Saint Palace, disciples were divided into 4 levels. From the bottom to the top, they were external disciples, internal disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. By raising the examination from the level of external disciples to the level of true disciples, the chance of these people passing was naturally infinitesimally close to 0. After all, true disciples were all king tiers. Young Master Da, the immortal palace tier elite, was slightly troubled by this. If he helped young Master Da, what would happen if news of this got out? He would also be unable to bear the consequences. "Don't worry, I've got your back," young Master Da said in an extremely arrogant voice. He casually threw a vial of alchemical pills at the immortal palace tier elite, saying, "This is a river of time pill. You've been stuck at the first secret for many years, and this alchemical pill can give you a sliver of a chance to advance to the second secret." The eyes of the immortal palace tier elite instantly lit up. He hurriedly caught the vial and said, "Since young Master Da has promised, I naturally don't have anything to worry about." This was a naked and undisguised exchange. Ling Han quietly observed this, and a cold smile involuntarily tugged at the corners of his lips. Initially, he had only wanted to enter the heavenly Saint Palace, after which he would use the Black Tower to enter their treasure storage. After that, he would then learn that omnipotent celestial technique. However, this young Master Da or whatnot was clearly trying to bully them. This caused him to become angry. "Yi Jianda, you're taking things too far." Ling Jianxue couldn't help but chide. "Impudence!" The 2 Earth Soul cultivators behind young Master Da roared in unison. "You actually dare to directly utter young Master Da's name? Kneel down and apologize." Young Master Da, or Yi Jianda, waved his hand and said, "No need to lower yourselves to the same level as him. Who told me to have a 5th heaven celestial king tier ancestor? Does he have one?" "Ling Jianxue, I admit that I'm blatantly bullying you. But what are you going to do? Bite me?" Ling Jianxue shook in fury, yet Yi Jianda was already admitting his brazen shamelessness. So what else could he say? He was rendered speechless. Ling Han sighed in his mind. Although his son's cultivation talent wasn't weak, his ability to argue was far too weak. In the future, he definitely had to send his son to train with the large black dog. Even if he couldn't kill others with words, he could still at least learn how to deride others. He patted his son's shoulder and stepped forward to interrupt, saying, "Regardless of what examination it is, can we start now?" The immortal palace tier elder looked over to Yi Jianda, who gave a nod of approval. Only after receiving this approval did he nod and say, "Indeed." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I'll go first." Chapter 2179, Heaven-ringing Stone. Chapter 2179, Heaven-ringing Stone. Yi Jianda naturally wouldn't care about whether Ling Han went first or Wenren went first. He was simply making things difficult for them and trying to discuss Ling Jianxue. He had no other option. He was doing everything he could to pursue Tu Hongying, yet he couldn't win her heart no matter what. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue had easily won her heart without any effort, so how could he not feel extreme jealousy? Thus, he was going out of his way to bully and discuss Ling Jianxue. "All right, then begin," the immortal palace tier elder said. His name was Duan Hyaming. Ling Han walked over to the column and placed his hand on it. This column was called the Heaven-ringing Stone, and it was specially used to examine the aptitude of cultivators. If normal people placed their hands on this column, there would be no reaction at all. Only when one reached or surpassed the king tier would the heaven-ringing stone let out a ring. Moreover, the higher one's aptitude, the louder and more vibrant this ring would be. The number of rings would also be greater. When Ling Jianxue had entered the heavenly Saint Palace, he had triggered 9 long rings from the heaven-ringing stone, with each ring reverberating through the entire heavenly Saint Palace. It was because of this that he had been accepted as a true disciple. After advancing to the severing mundane tier, he had more so been elevated to the status of core disciple. If he could advance even further and reach the 5th severance, he could even become a holy son. That would be a completely different status. At that time, even Yi Jianda wouldn't dare to target him anymore. This was because monarch tiers could definitely become celestial kings. Who dared to act wantonly before a future celestial king? A cold smile spread across Yi Jianda's face. He didn't believe that Ling Jianxue could bring 2 prodigies back so easily. Perhaps they were talented enough to become external disciples, but it would most likely be a challenge for them to even become internal disciples. As such, could they possibly become true disciples? The base requirement was for the heaven-ringing stone to release a loud ring. 1 ring would suffice. Ling Han placed his hand on the heaven-ringing stone, yet there was no reaction at all. Ha 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 ha. Yi Jianda instantly roared with laughter. Even though he didn't give a toss about Ling Han, he would definitely take any opportunity he could to deride Ling Jianxue. Are you not going to hurry up and piss off? The 2 Earth Soul Elites said. Why so impatient? You need to have some patience. Ling Han said in a calm voice. He was naturally doing this on purpose. It looked as if he had placed his hand on the column, yet it was actually a tiny distance away from it. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't notice this at all. Yi Jianda immediately turned to Duan Haiming and said, Lord Duan, hurry up and shoo him away. Yi Jianda naturally couldn't treat Ling Han with any sort of patience. Duan Haiming nodded before turning to Ling Han and saying, hurry up and piss off. Heh, I know how to do many things, but I don't know how to piss off. Why don't you demonstrate it for me? Ling Han said with a chuckle. Impudence. Duan Haiming roared in anger. Initially, he had only helped Yi Jianda because he had received a bribe from him. However, Ling Han was acting with such arrogance, and this made him feel genuine rage. He was at the Immortal Palace tier, and he was powerful enough to be regarded as an elite even in the celestial realm. Boom! He immediately lashed out, grabbing at Ling Han. Pa! There was a crisp slapping sound, and they all saw Duan Haiming flying back in disarray. There was a bright red hand mark on his old face. At this moment, Yi Jianda and his 2 lackeys were all transfixed with shock. It was as if they had been rendered stupid. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue and Wenren were completely unfazed. They had already witnessed Ling Han's godly power before, where he had even managed to rival a 5th secret elite. Thus, what could a measly 1st secret elite do? Their only fate was to be insta-killed. Duan Haiming crawled up from the floor, holding his cheek with his right hand. His face was filled with shock and disbelief. Once Ling Han lashed out, he naturally knew that he was only at the Heaven Soul. However, it was exactly because of this that he was shocked. A measly Heaven Soul had actually sent him flying with a single slap. Was he hallucinating? Just what kind of freak was this? Boom! At this moment, Ling Han finally placed his hand on the heaven-ringing stone. The stone column instantly lit up before releasing loud rings that reverberated through the heavens. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. When the stone column rang for the 3rd time, 7 ascending origin tier elites immediately flew over, landing in the hall. Their eyes were shining brightly as they gazed at Ling Han, and it was as if they were impatient to snatch him. This was a prodigy, and they wanted to take him as their disciple. 4 rings, 5 rings, 6 rings. At the 6th ring, there were already hundreds of ascending origin tier elites in the hall. Moreover, this number was steadily increasing. 7 rings, 8 rings, 9 rings. When the 9th ring sounded, there were already thousands of ascending origin tier elites in the hall. 10th ring, 11th ring, 12th ring. Wong! A terrifying aura emanated, paramount and unbounded. It was as if the heavenly Tao had descended. A figure appeared, with a peculiar ray of light around them. This was a celestial king. Everyone in the hall took a sharp breath. Ling Han had actually startled a celestial king. However, this only made sense. After all, that was 12 heavenly rings. In the entire history of the Heavenly Saint Palace, only a measly 300 people had triggered such a reaction before. Moreover, every single one of them had become a celestial king. Who didn't want to take such a disciple? However, the long and reverberant rings continued. 15th ring, 20th ring, 30th ring, wong wong wong. One after another, several celestial kings descended. Moreover, the rays of peculiar light around their bodies also started to increase. The most powerful celestial king present was already at the 5th heaven. Heavens! This signified that even 5th heaven celestial kings wanted to take Ling Han as their disciple. Duan Haiming trembled in fear. He was done for. This was the end. He had actually picked on the disciple of a celestial king. It would be useless even if Yi Jianda tried to help him would still suffer severe punishment. In fact, even Yi Jianda wouldn't be spared from punishment. He suddenly came to a realization. Ling Han had definitely done this on purpose. He had lured them to take the bait, egging them on to say many offensive things, and even causing him to lash out. Only then did he suddenly reveal his astounding natural talent, startling the celestial kings of the sect. However, what use was this realization? What was done was already done. He collapsed to the ground, feeling that his entire life was filled with gloom. However, Ling Han's performance had yet to conclude. 40th ring, 50th ring, 60th ring. At this moment, even 6th heaven celestial kings started to appear. After them, a 7th heaven celestial king also appeared in the hall. This person was the current palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Meanwhile, the only 8th heaven celestial king was the previous palace leader. He had already stepped down, and he was currently acting as a grand elder of the sect. During normal times, he wouldn't deal with any of the sect matters. 70th ring, 80th ring, 90th ring. After reaching the 90th ring, the long rings finally started to slow down, not appearing as hurried as before. 91, 95, 97, 98, 99. Finally, the long rings ground to a halt. The hall was filled with silence. Even the celestial kings were rendered speechless with shock. In the history of the Heavenly Saint Palace, only 279 people had triggered 20 rings from the heaven-ringing stone. Only 190 people had triggered 30 rings, and only one person had triggered 70 rings, the current palace leader. How many rings had the Grand Elder, the 8th Heaven Celestial King, and previous palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace triggered? No one knew. Perhaps only he had surpassed the limit of 90 rings. Whoosh! A young man appeared, and he only looked to be 15 or 16 years old. However, he was radiating with a primitive aura, and it was as if he were an ancient beast instead of a human. Like an ancient beast that had lived for countless years, his small figure seemingly contained a colossal power that could annihilate heaven and earth. Our respects to the Grand Elder. Those below the rank of Celestial King all kneeled down in respect. In fact, even the Celestial Kings bowed slightly toward that youth. This youth was surprisingly the most powerful elite of the Heavenly Saint Palace. He was a Mojua, an 8th Heaven Celestial King. He was also referred to as the Heavenly Saint Celestial King, and it was he who had founded the Heavenly Saint Palace. Everyone was astonished. Even the Heavenly Saint Celestial King had been startled by Ling Han. Mojua raised his hand, acknowledging their greetings. Even I could only trigger 83 rings from the heaven-ringing stone. Chapter 2180, Appointment. Chapter 2180, Appointment. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. Even the Heavenly Saint Celestial King had only caused the heaven-ringing stone to ring 83 times. Then just what did the 99 rings from Ling Han signify? Didn't this signify that he had the chance to become a paramount 9th Heaven Celestial King? At this moment, to say nothing of ascending origin tier elites and immortal palace tier elites, Even celestial kings gazed at Ling Han with an expression of envy. 9 Heaven Celestial King. These were the paragons of heaven and earth. Emojua pondered for a moment. 90 rings signified that Ling Han had the talent to become a 9th Heaven Celestial King. Meanwhile, 99 rings signified that he could become one of the most powerful 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Most importantly, the heavenly Tao had its limits. The 9th heaven was the limit, so 99 rings was also the limit of the heaven-ringing stone. What if Ling Han's potential was even greater? In the past, the heavenly Saint Celestial King had been a follower of the rock source beast. He had a close relationship with the rock palace, so he also knew some secrets that other 8th Heaven Celestial Kings didn't know. To his knowledge, there was still a genuinely paramount level above the level of 9th Heaven Celestial King. Heavenly Venerate. Heavenly Venerates had transcended above heaven and earth, yet the heaven-ringing stone wasn't transcendent above heaven and earth. Thus, it could only ring a maximum of 99 times. Even if Heavenly Venerates came, they could still only trigger 99 rings from the heaven-ringing stone. This was a limit imposed by heaven and earth. Young man, what's your name? Emojua asked in a friendly voice. He was naturally posing this question to Ling Han. Ling Han bowed in respect before saying, "This junior's name is Han Lin." He had changed his appearance, so he also changed his name as well. An emotional expression spread across Emojua's face, and he said, "I desire to take you as my disciple. However, my days here are limited, so there's not much that I can teach you. In any case, since such a prodigy has entered my heavenly saint palace, this must be the will of the heavens. Listen to my command. Han Lin can freely enter the Cloud Treasure Hall to comprehend Tao." Emojua's words were far too astonishing. What did he mean that his days were limited? He was a mighty 8th Heaven Celestial King, so who could force him to leave the heavenly saint palace? Moreover, he actually permitted Ling Han to freely enter the Cloud Treasure Hall to comprehend Tao. One had to realize that all of the heavenly saint palace's celestial techniques were stored there. In fact, even most celestial kings faced restrictions when entering the Cloud Treasure Hall. They were only allowed to comprehend a selected number of the celestial techniques. Indeed, Ling Han had the potential to become a 9th Heaven Celestial King in the future. However, this was only potential. The road to becoming a Celestial King was a long and challenging one. And just how many people had fallen on this arduous path of growth? After allowing Ling Han to comprehend the secrets of the Heavenly Saint Palace without restriction, what if he were captured by their enemies? Wouldn't that leak all of the Heavenly Saint Celestial King's celestial techniques? Having powerful elites was only one of the reasons that a powerful force could remain prosperous and undying. Possessing unique and powerful celestial techniques was the other important reason. Even the palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace was stunned, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "Venerable Master." Emojua waved his hand and said, "Great calamity is about to befall heaven and earth." At that time, even the existence of the Heavenly Saint Palace might be challenged. Cultivating good relationships can perhaps give the Heavenly Saint Palace an extra sliver of a chance at survival. Upon hearing this, everyone was transfixed with shock. Even 7th Heaven Celestial Kings were rendered speechless. Judging by Emojua's tone, he was seemingly extremely pessimistic about the future. Meanwhile, Ling Han came to a sudden realization. By leaving the Heavenly Saint Palace, Missouri-Jua was most likely heading off to resist the storm of darkness. This was also why there were always few celestial kings in the celestial realm. They would eventually all go to the border of the two realms to resist the storm of darkness. Emojua had clearly witnessed the power of the force of darkness before, and it was because of this that he held such pessimism. Perhaps the next arrival of the storm of darkness would spell the end of the celestial realm. In the face of such great calamity, only heavenly venerates could ensure their survival. Thus, if Ling Han became a heavenly venerate, and if he lent a helping hand to the Heavenly Saint Palace, the Heavenly Saint Palace would then have a chance of survival. However, becoming a heavenly venerate was far too difficult. It was almost an impossible task. This was why Emojua said there was only a sliver of a chance. Ling Han bowed in respect again. This celestial king possessed great wisdom. Just his resolve and magnanimity alone were deserving of his respect. Emojua smiled faintly. He knew that Ling Han understood his intentions. With a tap of his feet, an 8-colored celestial light shone around him. When everyone came to their senses, he had already disappeared. The palace leader of the Heavenly Saint Palace pondered for a moment before saying, "I hereby appoint Han Lin as the Heavenly Will Elder. His status is only beneath mine, and he has the power to check all elders." Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned once again. A measly dividing soul tier cultivator could actually enjoy a status superior to the Celestial Kings? Who could accept this? However, Ling Han developed deep respect and admiration for this palace leader. Since Emojua had already bestowed him with such great power, this palace leader decided to further push him along. In reality, trying to check and control all elders? The elders had to be willing to listen to him first. How could a measly dividing soul tier cultivator keep them in check? Thus, this position was in name only. It was simply a nice-sounding title. The Celestial Kings were naturally all extremely smart people, so they immediately understood the meaning behind all of this. As such, they didn't speak out in protest. After all, it was Emojua who had decided to bestow Ling Han with such great power. Who dared to disrespect an 8th heaven Celestial King? With everything said and done, there was naturally no reason for them to remain. They all left the hall. However, Duan Hyaming had nowhere to go, so he could only look toward Ling Han pitifully. In terms of strength, Ling Han could defeat him in a single strike. In terms of status, Ling Han had more so become the Heavenly Will Elder, the leader of all elders. But what was he? However, Ling Han simply patted his shoulder and said, "I won't stay in the Heavenly Saint Palace forever, so I still need you to look after Ling Jianxue." Duan Hyaming immediately nodded and said, "Yes, I understand." A relieved smile spread across his face. By saying this, it was clear that Ling Han didn't intend to punish him for his actions. Thus, he was naturally as delighted as could be. In any case, if he could become acquainted with the Heavenly Will Elder, what did it matter even if he became a slave or a servant? This was someone who could become a 9th heaven Celestial King in the future. This was someone whom even the Heavenly Saint Celestial King wanted to cultivate a good relationship with. He naturally understood that Ling Han was only forgiving him because he wanted him to look after Ling Jianxue. As such, he would naturally complete this task to the best of his ability. Ling Han then turned to Yi Jianda, and there was a menacing glint in his eyes. Yi Jianda humphed upon seeing this. Even though the palace leader and the Heavenly Saint Celestial King both viewed Ling Han in high regard, he was still only a dividing soul tier cultivator, after all. He was heaven knew how far away from becoming a genuine Celestial King. As such, did he dare to target him? Of course, he didn't dare continue to target Ling Han, either. After all, his status as the Heavenly Will Elder was truly quite frightening. "Let's go." He waved his hand and left with his 2 subordinates. He would find another chance to target Ling Jianxue in the future. Ling Han didn't stop him. He would help his son, but he definitely wouldn't do everything for his son. Without facing challenges and obstacles, how could he develop strength and tenacity? Right now, the most pressing matter was to increase the strength of his son. After all, he couldn't step forward to help every single time. Could he? With him, the Heavenly Will Elder, standing guard, Wenren naturally passed the examination with no problem at all. Of course, this wasn't because Ling Han had opened a back door. Instead, this woman was truly talented enough to become a true disciple. Even Ling Han was slightly surprised by this. After completing the examination, Ling Han directly dragged Ling Jianxue into the Black Tower, where he would subject him to special training. No matter what, his son definitely had to become a 5th Severance Monarch tier. After learning about the dangers of trying to reach the 5th Severance, Helian Xuanxue tried to convince her husband and son to change their minds. If Ling Jianxue failed to reach the 5th Severance, his only fate would be death. Thus, she preferred her son to be mediocre, especially if that meant he could live on peacefully. However, Ling Jianxue was extremely resolute. With such a powerful father, even if he couldn't stand shoulder to shoulder with him, he still had to follow in his footsteps. He couldn't fall behind too much. He started to cultivate toward the fifth severance. Chapter 2181, Planning for his son. Chapter 2181, Planning for his son. Ling Jianxue worked hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower. All kinds of rare and valuable cultivation resources were funneled into him high-level alchemical pills, dragon crystals, and all kinds of natural treasures. As long as he needed them, they would be immediately provided to him. One day passed in the outside world, and this was equivalent to a whopping 100,000 days in the Black Tower. Thus, in just 100 days in the outside world, Ling Jianxue had already reached the pinnacle of the fourth severance. He could already feel the barrier to the fifth severance. This was inevitable. Ling Han, Hun Yo, and the Empress had all reached the fifth severance, so this allowed him to observe and learn from them all the time. He also possessed extraordinary talent himself, and he was able to utilize a boundless amount of cultivation resources. Thus, it would be strange if he couldn't feel the barrier to the fifth severance. He started to calm his mind, preparing to take that critical step. Meanwhile, Ling Han stayed in the Cloud Treasure Hall all day every day, comprehending the celestial techniques of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Initially, he had only wanted that omnipotent cultivation technique. However, since Emojua gave him permission to freely enter the Cloud Treasure Hall, he naturally wouldn't waste this opportunity. He investigated and comprehended all kinds of celestial techniques. I want to perfect the Fists of Fury and create my own technique. Ling Han had a lofty ambition. Only the Tao that belonged to him was the most powerful Tao. That omnipotent technique was called the Heaven-defying technique, and this was an extremely mystical technique. Ling Han speculated that this technique hadn't been created by the Heavenly Saint Celestial King. Rather, he had most likely obtained it from some unknown place. This technique had most likely been created by a ninth heaven Celestial King, or perhaps even a heavenly venerate. After reaching initial mastery of the Heaven-defying technique, one could conceal their aura and appear like an ordinary mortal. After reaching great mastery, one could emit an aura of any cultivation level that they wanted. Of course, this aura could only be equivalent to, or lower than, their own cultivation level. For example, an immortal palace tier elite couldn't emit the aura of a celestial king. After reaching consummate mastery, one could truly deceive heaven and earth. They could emit any aura that they wanted, and they could even disguise themselves as a ninth heaven celestial king. As long as they didn't get into a conflict, no one would be able to see through them. It was as he practiced this heaven-defying technique that Ling Han continued to comprehend and investigate the other celestial techniques in the Cloud Treasure Hall. In the end, he sacrificed all of this to form his own unique Tao. Several days later, Ling Jianxue exited the Black Tower. He already possessed the confidence to reach the fifth severance. "Are you certain?" Ling Han asked in a solemn voice. This was his son, so he naturally had to be extremely careful. He couldn't allow any accidents. Ling Jianxue wore a proud smile as he said, "Don't worry, father." Jianxue. Helian Xuanxue was still extremely worried. She had heard the Empress and Hun Yo say that the fifth severance was extremely difficult to reach. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been so few celestial kings in the world. "Mother, I know what I'm doing," Ling Jianxue said in a confident voice. "All right, let's head off." Placing Ling Jianxue into the Black Tower, Ling Han left the Heavenly Saint Palace and arrived at a desolate and uninhabited location. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue continued to charge at the fifth severance inside the Black Tower. 2 days later. "Father, let me out," Ling Jianxue shouted. A wild aura raged around his body. Ling Han nodded, and he released Ling Jianxue from the Black Tower with a single thought. Crack! There was a rumble of thunder, and a boundless number of dark clouds swept over, forming heavenly tribulation. Ling Jianxue naturally possessed a natural peach sealet, was given to him by Hun Yo. Even though the rock palace had been flattened, a large majority of their treasures had been left with Hun Yo. This was the backup plan prepared by Long Yueshi because she believed in Ling Han. Ling Jianxue soared into the sky, actively flying toward his heavenly tribulation. Crack, crack, Crack! Devastating arcs of lightning continued to strike down. The fifth severance was far too important as it signified that one could definitely become a celestial king. Thus, the tribulation that descended from heaven and earth would also be especially powerful, and perhaps even severe. Without a natural peach seal, one didn't need to dream about passing this tribulation. Half a day passed, and Ling Jianxue finally descended from the sky. He was drenched in blood, and countless bones of his had also been broken. However, he had ultimately passed the heavenly tribulation. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face. After reaching the fifth severance, his son's future would be bright and limitless. He tossed Ling Jianxue into the Black Tower to recuperate. Afterward, he started to head back to the Heavenly Saint Palace. The flow of time inside the Black Tower was far too quick, so when Ling Han arrived back at the Heavenly Saint Palace, Ling Jianxue had already recovered to his most powerful state. Ling Han spent some time condensing the celestial techniques that he had comprehended into a technique most suitable for his son. There was no sun and moon in the Black Tower, and time flew past them at an incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of years had already passed. However, this was only 1 month in the outside world. Ling Jianxue's battle prowess truly reached the level of a monarch tier. Moreover, he could definitely rank in the top, even among monarch tiers. However, it was a shame that he was still unable to rival Ling Han. Compared to Hun Yo and the Empress at the same stage of their cultivation, he was still slightly inferior. After all, Hun Yo had been the successor of a ninth heaven celestial king tier force. Moreover, she also possessed the martial imprint of a ninth heaven celestial king. Meanwhile, the Empress had shared some of Ling Han's fortune, allowing her to obtain an unimaginable amount of natural treasures. To say nothing else, both women had refined a source power of heaven and earth. Even so, Ling Jianxue was still extremely satisfied. Natural peach seals were far too rare. In fact, if he'd only relied on the Heavenly Saint Palace, he would have never been able to obtain one. Thus, he was already surprised and ecstatic that he could reach the fifth severance. Right now, Ling Jianxue possessed the ability to become a holy son of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Ling Jianxue ended his cultivation, but he didn't immediately report his breakthrough to the Heavenly Saint Palace. Instead, he continued to temper his cultivation. In the near future, the sect would host a grand competition between core disciples, and he wanted to make a name for himself there. In the beginning, Wenren had still been extremely reserved. Recently, however, she became increasingly bold, not hiding her love for Ling Jianxue anymore. This gave Ling Jianxue a huge headache. If he rejected her, he would be hurting her too much. After all, they had gone through adversity together. If he didn't reject her, however, that would also be far too troublesome. More importantly, he was afraid that Chen Shuangshuang would misunderstand. Even though he had indirectly told her that he loved someone else, Wenren didn't mind this at all. She had said that it was normal for a prodigy such as him to have several lovers. Moreover, Ling Han was also adding fuel to the flames, continually creating opportunities for them to be together. As a result, the two of them almost never left each other. Tap, tap, tap. Chen Shuangshuang suddenly ran over. "Uncle, the behavior of those two is truly outrageous," she said with her hands on her hips. There was displeasure on her face, and she continued, "They're not cultivating in earnest, and they're always sticking to each other. What's the meaning of this?" Ling Han chuckled and asked, "Whom are you talking about?" "Your son, of course," Chen Shuangshuang said with a huff. "What's with that woman? Does she not have her own abode? She doesn't return even at night. Does she have no shame? What's wrong? Have they interfered with you?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Tisk, I'm only worried about junior brother Ling," Chen Shuangshuang said with a humph. Ling Han took a sip of tea before saying, "Jianxue is also at the age where he needs to get married. Since the two of them have a good relationship, we should let them become husband and wife." "We can't do that." Chen Shuangshuang immediately jumped up and said, "Haven't you seen junior brother Ling's expression of unwillingness whenever he's with that woman? Uncle, you can't mismatch two people." Ling Han spread his hands and asked, Then what can I do? Chen Shuang was simple-minded, so she couldn't help but scratch her head in worry. Ling Han smiled and said, I have an idea. Chen Shuang's eyes lit up, and she asked, What idea? Why don't you get married to Jin Xue? Seeing that Chen Shuang was just about to jump up, Ling Han hurriedly waved his hands and signaled for her to calm down, saying, A fake marriage, of course, to shoo away all of those other lovers. That way, your junior brother Ling can also cultivate in peace. Chapter 2182, From Make-Believe to Reality. Chapter 2182, From Make-Believe to Reality. But Chen Shuang was clearly a little hesitant. So you're not willing to help junior brother Ling? Ling Han said slowly. Sigh, and you say that you're a loyal friend. You clearly just said that for show. Chen Shuang immediately retorted. Who was saying that for show? Fine, then I'll get married to him. Ling Han nodded and said, All right, then I'll organize this matter. You can prepare to become the bride. A fake one, Chen Shuang stressed. Yes, a fake one, Ling Han replied. Chen Shuang left, and the Empress and the others walked out from inside. When they became bored in the Black Tower, they would come out for a walk. However, they wouldn't be seen by others. Husband, you're truly so evil, Xue Yinyu said. She had been a teacher in the past, so she had a strong sense of righteousness. Ling Han sighed and said, There's nothing else I can do. Who told her to be so naive? Who told my stupid son to be so bad at expressing himself? Who's a stupid son? Helian Xue asked in displeasure. In a mother's eyes, their son was naturally always the best. Ling Han laughed and said, Anyhow, if this girl hadn't had feelings for Jin Xue, would she have become jealous and run over here to complain? Would she have agreed to the fake marriage to save Jin Xue? That's true, the women said with a nod. Chen Shuang was simply airhead, so she hadn't realized her feelings for Ling Jinxue. However, she had barely hesitated before agreeing to the fake marriage with Ling Jinxue. This was already proof enough of her love for Ling Jinxue. If it had been someone else, would they have agreed? Ling Han chuckled in anticipation. Once the wedding was held, it would become real even if it was fake. We'll seize this opportunity to create some more commotion. He spread news of this wedding, and the entire Heavenly Saint Palace instantly knew that Ling Jinxue was about to marry Chen Shuang. What? Ling Jinxue, the bridegroom, only learned of this from someone else. He hurriedly ran over to Ling Han, asking, Father, what in the world is going on? Perhaps you don't want to marry your senior sister Qin? Ling Han said with a smile. Ling Jinxue instantly became shy and bashful. He naturally wanted to marry her. However, this was far too sudden, and Chen Shuang didn't even know about his feelings yet. Why was she suddenly going to marry him? Moreover, he was the bridegroom, so why did he only learn of this wedding just now? I do want to, but... Ling Han laughed and said, No need for buts. Just wait to be a bridegroom. Ling Jinxue, come out here. Right at this moment, a loud shout suddenly traveled over from outside. Ling Jinxue ran out, only to see Wang Liangchun standing at the door. He appeared extremely angry. Senior brother Wang, what's wrong? He asked. Wang Liangchun humphed and said, I forbid you from marrying junior sister Chun. Ling Jinxue scoffed and said, Firstly, you have no relationship with me. Secondly, you have no relationship with senior sister Chun. What right do you have to forbid this marriage? Because you're not worthy of her. Wang Liangchun said with arrogance, With your measly strength, how can you be worthy of junior sister Chun? Then are you worthy? Naturally. Ling Jinxue gestured for him to come over, saying, Then please show me, senior brother Wang. You're seeking punishment. Wang Liangchun said in disdain. He had reached the fourth severance millions of years before Ling Jinxue, and right now, he had already tempered the fourth severance to a consummate state. He was only a step away from advancing to the dividing soul tier. In other words, his battle prowess was naturally superior to Ling Jinxue's. Since you're asking for humiliation, I'll satisfy your request. With a tap of his feet, Wang Liangchun instantly soared into the sky. Come, a battle in the sky. Ling Jinshue's fighting spirit soared. After advancing to the 5th severance, he still had yet to fight with anyone else. He only knew that he was far more powerful than before, but he didn't know just how powerful he was. With a tap of his feet, he also leaped into the sky. "Senior Brother Wang, please," he said in a courteous voice. This was because he was confident, so he didn't need to act in a reckless or sinister manner. Wang Liangchun sneered and said, "I'll make you submit within 100 moves." With a flash, he charged toward Ling Jinxue, unleashing a powerful celestial technique as he did so. Ling Jinxue replied with a punch. Pong! In a single exchange, Wang Liangchun was sent stumbling back. He retreated several hundred kilometers. Wah! Wang Liangchun violently coughed a mouthful of blood, an expression of shock and disbelief on his face. How was his opponent so powerful? In fact, even Ling Jinxue hadn't expected this result. He only knew that he was definitely more powerful than Wang Liangchun. However, he hadn't expected to achieve victory in a single exchange. Moreover, he had done so in a crushing manner. Monarch tiers were naturally more powerful than Emperor tiers, and it was when they became 5th severance cultivators that their advantage would be the most obvious. If they were both at the Yang Soul, even though Ling Jinxue would still be more powerful, he definitely wouldn't be able to wound Wang Liangchun in a single strike. Wang Liangchun took a sharp breath and loudly asked, what kind of celestial pill did you take?" Ling Jinxue laughed and said, "Senior Brother Wang, thank you for letting me win." Victory had been decided, so there was naturally no need to continue this battle. Moreover, he now understood just how much more powerful than his opponent he was. "I haven't lost yet," Wang Liangchun shouted, clearly unwilling to give up. He immediately tensed up and charged at Ling Jinxue again. "You can't even see the gulf between us, so how can you possibly catch me?" Ling Jinxue said. He tapped his finger at Wang Liangchun. Pong! Wang Liangchun was sent flying again. He was still unable to block a single strike from Ling Jinxue. The advantage of a 5th severance cultivator over a 4th severance cultivator was like the advantage of a dividing soul tier cultivator over a severing mundane tier cultivator. It was far too great. Wang Liangchun finally understood the insurmountable gulf between him and Ling Jinxue. He could only glare at Ling Jinxue before turning around to leave. Just like he had said before, fighting any more would only be seeking humiliation. Ling Jinxue descended from the sky and excitedly said to Ling Han, "Father, I'm actually this powerful." Ling Han laughed and said, "Your journey is still long, so if you become content with your current situation, the gates to the Celestial King tier might not open up for you." "I understand." Ling Jinxue immediately suppressed his feeling of excitement. Afterward, several more displeased senior brothers and junior brothers visited to challenge Ling Jinxue. However, they were all easily defeated. Who in the severing mundane tier was his opponent? Even if young soul cultivators challenged him, Ling Jinxue could still rival them. It was just that he couldn't defeat them. He won more and more battles, and this also caused the sect to view him in higher regard. In the end, they finally realized that he had become a monarch tier. This caused commotion to sweep through the heavenly Saint Palace. Monarch tiers were destined to become celestial kings. Even in the heavenly Saint Palace, such a prodigy would only appear once every tens of billions of years. Because of this, Ling Jinxue was also elevated to the status of Holy Son. His future path would definitely be bright and limitless. With Ling Han's earlier notification, Tu Hongying naturally wasn't able to cause a fuss during the wedding either. This allowed Ling Jinxue and Chen Shuangshuang's wedding to proceed smoothly. A day after the wedding, Ling Jinxue brought Chen Shuangshuang over to pay respects to his parents. During this process, Ling Han's daughter-in-law shot a sharp glare at him. It was clear that even though she was airhead, she had finally realized that she had been tricked by Ling Han. However, what was done was already done. Last night, she hadn't been able to resist Ling Jinshue's stubborn coaxing, and she had also been slightly muddle-headed thanks to the large amount of alcohol that she had consumed. In the end, she had become one with that bastard. Ultimately, it was still because her father-in-law Ling Han was far too shameless. He had actually tricked her into this result. Chapter 2183, Leaping the Dragon's Gate. Chapter 2183, Leaping the Dragon's Gate. After Ling Jianxue and his wife got married, they left the Heavenly Saint Palace, firstly to enjoy their married life, secondly for training, and thirdly also because they would keep being harassed if they stayed in the sect. Even if Ling Jianxue had already married, there were still a great many female disciples willing to pounce on him. He was a man, after all, so wouldn't it be very normal that he would have a good number of lovers? And Chen Shuangshuang was unable to chase away all the pestering bugs, either, as there would be people expressing goodwill to her. Hence, the young couple decided to just leave. What they did not see, their hearts would not grieve over. After several hundred to over 1,000 years, all this would naturally be appeased. Ling Han, too, prepared to leave. He had already cultivated the heaven-deceiving technique to small accomplishment level, and was sure that he would be able to attain great accomplishment not much later, but to reach consummate level, he would still have to spend a boundless amount of time. Several days later, Ling Han received a piece of news. Dragon's Gate Mountain? Leaping over the Dragon's Gate? This was the newest information that the scouts of the Heavenly Saint Palace had obtained. Rich and powerful great sects like the Heavenly Saint Palace naturally had innumerable feelers which they extended to all corners of the celestial realm. Their main purpose was to monitor if there were any changes in authority in the many great forces and important matters of the like. Additionally, the appearance and opening of ancient sites was also within their range of monitoring. After all, some ancient sites were extremely important and could even alter the destiny of a great sect. Who knows what the hell this Dragon's Gate Mountain is? Ling Han flipped through the information and became increasingly surprised as he continued reading, also revealing an expression of pleasant surprise. What Dragon's Gate Mountain? Hunyo asked curiously. Ling Han nodded and said, "This is really a place where the carp leaps the Dragon's Gate. According to the information, this Dragon's Gate Mountain is not located in the celestial realm, but rather floats in the void. It will only appear once every epoch, and if one is able to reach the summit and leap over the Dragon's Gate, it would result in a complete transformation." Transforming into a dragon? Hunyo continued to ask. The dragon is the most powerful immortal beast, and turning into a dragon is only a way of putting it. Not that you would really transform into an immortal dragon, Ling Han replied with a smile. The climbing of Dragon's Gate Mountain only depends on willpower, and not on natural talent. If your willpower is not strong enough, no matter how prodigious you are, even a monarch tier could not possibly complete the climb. And if you have an iron willpower, you could still undergo a complete transformation even if you are an idiot and become a dragon in a single stroke, opening the doors to a supreme path of cultivation. Most importantly, it can allow one to deliver a severance to the heaven and earth. Ling Han exclaimed excitedly. Heli and Xuanxue and the other women were all stuck at peak stage Genesis tier and hesitated, not daring to take a single step further. Even if they were to sever the mundane, their greatest obsession would definitely be the love they felt towards Ling Han. However, their aptitude was not adequate, and they could not strike a severance to the heaven and earth to take their step into the realm of celestials. Thus, before their lifespan dried up, or they reached the point where the immortals' tribulation became too serious, they would definitely not make the move to advance to the severing mundane tier. However, as long as they could leap over the Dragon's Gate, they could greatly transform themselves and improve their aptitude of cultivation. Delivering a strike to the heaven and earth to enter into the realm of celestials naturally would become possible, and the chances were extremely high at that. More importantly, the requirement for climbing the Dragon's Gate Mountain and leaping over the Dragon's Gate was not aptitude, natural talent, strength, or cultivation level, but merely pure determination. "We will definitely succeed." The women were all confident and were also incredibly determined. They had fallen too far behind Ling Han and had to grab hold of this chance. Strange. Ling Han suddenly faltered. According to the information, the Dragon's Gate Mountain would only appear once every epoch and is a genuine heaven-defying great opportunity that would alter your destiny, but from the last time it appeared until now, it has only been 9 trillion years. One epoch was 12 trillion years. Even if there is deviation, It should not go so far as deviation for 3 trillion years. The Empress nodded as well. Just how long was 3 trillion years? If there was a deviation of tens of millions of years, or even 100 million years, that would still be acceptable. After all, the basic figure was too large. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind, and he said, unless this is a consciousness of the heaven and earth wanting to nurture more prodigies to stand against the invasion of the force of darkness. Everyone nodded. The heavenly Tao channeled with its own logic. For example, when a cultivator broke through, a heavenly tribulation would descend, and that was the heaven and earth working on maintaining a balance, not allowing someone who was too strong to appear, disturbing the channeling of the heavenly Tao. And now, the heaven and earth felt a great threat to its existence, so the heaven and earth would appropriately make some changes, such as allowing the Dragon's Gate mountain to appear ahead of time. And that was the heaven and earth moving as a self-protective measure. However, even the heaven and earth is compelled to make such drastic changes. It can be imagined just what kind of great threat it has sensed this time round. The pressure is so great that it did not hesitate to make a great change to the channeling of heavenly Tao. Ling Han looked worried. Perhaps, the next time the force of darkness fully invades, it will be considerably sooner than we have predicted. The Empress nodded. What we need the most now is time. Even with the 100,000x time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, it was not enough. The more their cultivation levels progressed, the slower their advancement would become, especially after they advanced into Celestial King tier. Using a whole epoch to advance to the next heaven was nothing rare. Even if the force of darkness would only invade fully after another 1 million years, that would only be 1 trillion years for Ling Han, less than 1/10 of a whole epoch. Perhaps Ling Han could have become a 9th heaven celestial king by then, but a heavenly venerate. It'd be difficult. Since even the heaven and earth has been compelled to make changes, the leap over the Dragon's Gate this time would definitely have great benefits. We have to take hold of this opportunity. Ling Han immediately came to a decision. To give the women the ability of delivering a strike to the heaven and earth to advance into the realm of celestials, Ling Han had to take this detour. What more when it would also be greatly beneficial for himself, the Empress, Hunyo, and the others. There's not much time, or I would want to make a trip back to the Eastern Celestial Realm and bring everyone else with me, Ling Han said. The everyone else he was speaking of was naturally referring to the veterans that he had brought with him from the small world, such as his cousin, the peerlessly talented maniac, Gu Fenghua, the white-robed Sword King, Shen Zhongqian, and so on. The Dragon's Gate Mountain would not be there forever. The time it stayed every time was indefinite, but it would not be too long before it would rip a hole into the void and leave once more. Who knows where Jianxue and Shuangshuang have gone off to? Hopefully, they would have gotten the news as well. After the decision was made, they immediately set out. It was not just them, but the entire celestial realm that had erupted in a commotion. Without caring if they could make it in time, countless people rushed towards the Dragon's Gate Mountain. Even celestial kings were not exempted. This was truly a natural mystery realm, a test from the heaven and earth, and a blessing from the heaven and earth. Even if they were elites, they could still get rid of the impurities in their bodies after leaping over the Dragon's Gate, and improve in all aspects, advancing in the direction of heavenly Tao. It was probably only 9th heaven celestial kings that would have completely no use for this. The heaven and earth would definitely not allow anyone to rise above regulations, so 9th heaven celestial kings could not possibly be allowed to advance one step further and cross over into heavenly venerable tier. Of course, for a heavenly venerate, this definitely was also a meaningless matter. Xiao, 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 Wang, Wang, Wang. Multiple figures shot out of Heavenly Saint Palace, and the transference portal of Red Blossom Village was also endlessly flickering with light. It was practically channeling without stopping, delivering wave after wave of people. Though it wasn't able to cross the boundaries of heavenly realms, it could still save a great amount of journeying time and allow people to arrive at the boundaries of Rock Heaven. Ling Han and his group also arrived at Red Blossom Village. To increase their pace, only Hunyo and the Empress were by his side, while the others remained inside the Black Tower. Humph, humph. When they arrived at the transfer formation, they saw Yijinda look menacingly at them. Then, with a flash of light, he had already disappeared from sight. Saying that comes from a Chinese folklore legend referring to how a carp can eventually become a dragon by leaping over the dragon's gate also means getting one's big break. Chapter 2184, Sealing the Path. Chapter 2184, Sealing the Path. The reason that Yijinda so daringly provoked Ling Han like this was because there was another tall, sturdy man standing at his side. He looked to be only about 30, but five-colored light was actually entwining around him. This was a fifth heaven celestial king, the celestial king of the Yi clan, Yi Wuhai. With a fifth heaven celestial king by his side, Yijinda naturally dared to glare angrily at Ling Han. Furthermore, if this was not still the territory of the heavenly Saint Palace, he would even beg Yi Wuhai to kill Ling Han for him. Killing intent flashed through Ling Han's eyes. He had initially planned to leave this kind of trash for his son to deal with, but this trash was actually so arrogant. He was really courting his own death. On the Dragon's Gate Mountain, everyone will be equivalent to a carp that is waiting to leap over the Dragon's Gate. Heavenly Tao is extremely just. Everyone's cultivation level will be suppressed to Mountain River tier, and there will be no Celestial King tier, or Ascending Origin tier, or Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han recited the information about Dragon's Gate Mountain that he had memorized. So what if he is a Celestial King? If he dares to interfere at that time, I will try my luck at killing a Celestial King. In a battle of equal levels, aside from Ji Wuming, who else would be able to match me? Ling Han was brimming with confidence. He was definitely not overestimating himself. Ji Wuming had once been a ninth heaven Celestial King, and the reason he had reincarnated and began cultivating from the beginning had to be because he wanted to break through to the heavenly venerable tier. Thus, he had surely been stronger than he had been at this cultivation level in his past life. Just how awesome was a ninth heaven Celestial King? Thus, the present Ji Wuming had to be superior to all Celestial Kings if they were at the same cultivation level. Even a ninth heaven Celestial King was no exception. Yet Ling Han could manage to battle Ji Wuming to a stalemate. This meant that he could also dominate all Celestial Kings that were at the same cultivation level as himself. Because there were really too many people that wanted to use this transfer formation, everyone could only line up. Though Ling Han was the Heavenly Will Elder, he did not have many special privileges either. After all, his cultivation level was too low, and not even Ascending Origin tiers needed to be wary of him. What more a Celestial King? After lining up for over a day, they finally boarded the transfer formation. Wong, light surged, and they felt a strong physical pull on their bodies. When they regained their wits, they had already arrived at the small town that was on the westernmost boundary of the Rock Heaven. Walking from here towards the west for less than 5,000 kilometers, one would have exited the Rock Heaven. Then, one would have to pass over the Nine Dragons Heaven, Deep Sea Heaven, and 5 other heavenly realms to be able to enter the Yin River Heaven. This time, the Dragon's Gate Mountain had appeared there. They began hurrying on their journey. Ling Han used void space and crossed millions and millions of kilometers, his speed being higher than even most Immortal Palace tiers. Even so, they had still required half a year's time before finally entering the Yin River Heaven. The Yin River Heaven lived up to its name. Wherever they were, they would be able to see a long river flowing across the skies. It was dark and dense like iron, but this long river was so high it could not be reached. Even Immortal Palace tiers could not touch it before they would be struck back down by the storm above the 9 heavens. However, Ascending Origin tiers could give it a try, but it was said that the waters of the Yin River were incredibly and extraordinarily freezing. Even Ascending Origin tiers could not stand against this extreme coldness and would be frozen to death. However, for cultivators who cultivated the regulation of water, this was a sacred place as they could better study the great Tao of water here. Let's check where exactly the Dragon's Gate Mountain is. They found a map and began searching. Here. Once they had confirmed the direction, they continued on their journey, advancing towards the Dragon's Gate Mountain. Because they were not familiar with the area, they spent some additional time. After over a dozen days, they finally arrived at the foot of the Dragon's Gate mountain. This had initially been a great ocean, but now an indescribably massive great mountain had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, filling up the entire ocean. It was abundantly clear how colossal the mountain was. However, if one looked up from the foot of the mountain, he would not be able to see the summit at all, and could only see divine clouds and celestial mist wafting around, taking the form of dragons, phoenixes, and other beasts. It also seemed like there was a celestial seated there, reciting the great Tao, which manifested into the light of regulations. The Dragon's Gate mountain was indeed extraordinary. Ding, 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 dang, 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 dang. Battles were happening everywhere at the foot of the mountain. There was strife everywhere as long as there were people, and there was nothing false about this. After entering into the area of the Dragon's Gate mountain, Ling Han and his group immediately discovered that not only had they lost the ability of flight, even the height that they could leap was greatly restricted. It was as if they had become mere mortals all of a sudden. True, the Dragon's Gate mountain would have been too easy to climb otherwise. We can't draw others into the spatial god tool. Without the records of our entire journey up the mountain, the heaven and earth would absolutely not give us any recognition. Even if we did manage to leap over the Dragon's Gate, it would be for nothing. Ling Han released the women from inside the Black Tower. Next, everyone could only depend on themselves. Even if they were carried up the mountain, that, too, would not be recognized by the heaven and earth. It's fine. Walking for a while is a healthy exercise, Li Sikhan joked. However, flight is not possible, nor can one leap too high or too far. In that case, we would not be able to use this path. Ling Han cast his gaze afar. It was all steep, sheer cliffs in this mountainous area, and it could not be so easily crossed. We have to find a major path. They retreated from the mountainous area and immediately regained the ability of flight. They circled around the mountain and soon found a main path that was relatively easier to travel. According to the information, there were many such main paths, and there was no need for them all to be cramped on this one to ascend the mountain. Ling Han and his group all descended, and were about to advance when they heard that this area had actually been sealed off by someone. Scram! Immediately, someone shouted at Ling Han and the others. This place has already been occupied by our Battle Dragon Palace. Any intruders will be killed. Does this place belong to you? Ling Han was surprised. There was no rare treasure in this Dragon's Gate mountain, nor were there any celestial medicines or cultivation techniques, and everyone could leap over the Dragon's Gate. Was there any need to seal off the mountain? But when he thought about it further, realization dawned on him. When they were on the mountain, everyone would be restrained by the Tao of heaven and earth. Should they encounter enemies, the advantage elites had in their superior cultivation level could not be exercised at all. It was completely dependent on their strength in a battle of equal levels, which also meant that even if it was a celestial king, if he met with a more freakishly talented severing mundane tier or dividing soul tier, it was still possible that they could be defeated and killed. Hence, to ensure their safety, sealing off the path was naturally the best strategy. If no one could ascend, there naturally would not be any outbreaks of battle, and there was naturally no need to worry. Battle Dragon Palace? Not a bad name, but why is everyone as scared as mice, and completely not daring to battle? Ling Han shook his head, appearing extremely disdainful. Brat, spare the nonsense and scram. There were over a dozen people from the Battle Dragon Palace that were responsible for sealing off the path up the mountain, but their strength was all very low. True, how could those with some strength be willing to seal off the path here? They definitely would have ascended the mountain, wanting to leap over the Dragon's Gate, and turn their ordinary aptitude into extraordinary quality. However, the name of the Battle Dragon Palace was still quite intimidating. It was an ascending origin tier force, so it was no wonder that these people dared to act so arrogantly. You guys are the ones who should scram. Hunyo shot out a fist. Pong, as her punch swept past. All the members of the Battle Dragon Palace were sent flying, scattering like flower petals in the air. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his head. The heaven and earth has deliberately allowed the Dragon's Gate Mountain to arrive in advance for the specific purpose of allowing more elites to appear so that a resistance can be put up against the force of darkness. But these people actually wanted to seal off the mountain. To go against the will of heaven and earth, how could they possibly gain the approval of the heaven and earth? You deserved it. They ascended the mountain and immediately discovered that they had lost all ability of flight, and their progress had also become slower and slower. The test from heaven and earth had already begun. The great mountain rose majestically and could not be seen entirely as far as the eye could see. Everyone was focused on hastening on with their journey. It was said that one could not enter into a spatial god tool for the entirety of the climb up the mountain, or all previous efforts would be completely wasted. Thus, they had to manage their stamina. This place seemed divine, yet was extremely short of spiritual chi, and one could only rely on alchemical pills to replenish the origin power that had been expended. Chapter 2185, Rolling Rocks. Chapter 2185, Rolling Rocks. After walking for a day, the mountain path began to slant. Slightly further ahead, two mountain paths had joined and become one. If they continued upwards, the mountain paths would continue to join and ultimately become a single mountain path that would lead right up to the Dragon's Gate. After another day's journey, the mountain paths joined once more, and this time, it was four joined into one. Everyone could feel the difficulties of their journey. It was as if they had become mortals, but the object they had to conquer was a mountain that ascended to the heavens. How could they possibly succeed in such a feat? Thus, it was not strength, cultivation level, or natural talent that was required to ascend the Dragon's Gate Mountain, but rather only a determined will and the courage to conquer all. Ling Han included, the pressure that everyone had to sustain was actually different. Even if Ling Han had cultivated the dividing 9 souls and had 9 source powers of heaven and earth, he did not have any advantage in this place at all, either. Everyone was soaked in sweat and felt extremely weary. They wanted nothing more than to stop for a rest, or even turn right around and descend the mountain. True elites would have to have willpower as strong and firm as iron. We must all forge on. Another day passed, and it was no longer the barren mountain path ahead of them. Instead, a group of people had appeared, and they were presently seated on rocks for a rest. These people had also heard the noise created by Ling Han and his group as they climbed, and turned their eyes towards them, a vigilant expression immediately appearing on their faces. In this place, a high cultivation level was not of much use. Even an ascending origin tier could possibly be killed by a severing mundane tier. There were a total of 9 people in this group, and a purple-robed middle-aged man stood up from the group and shouted at Ling Han, "Friend, don't go any further." "Why?" Ling Han asked smilingly. "If you continue onwards, we will consider you an enemy and kill you," this purple-robed large man declared, a powerful killing intent appearing in his expression. This group of people were all members of the Battle Dragon Palace, and the purple-robed large man, their leader, was an ascending origin tier elite. However, what was important here was merely willpower, and not cultivation level, and these people all belonged to the category of weaker willpower. Thus, they continuously stopped to rest, and had already split off from the rest of the majority. At present, everyone had practically been weakened to mortal level. So what if he was an ascending origin tier? Thus, they all feared that Ling Han and his group would use force, and naturally hoped that they would not come nearer, but would instead mind their own business. Ling Han thought of the storm of darkness. Suppressing his anger, he said, "Don't worry. There is no previous grudge between us, and conflict will not rise between us. Thus, you guys just have to quietly sit there, and we will only pass you by on our way up the mountain." "Ha, you actually plan to take advantage of the chance to launch an ambush on us, right?" Someone from the Battle Dragon Palace called out. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. These people themselves were vile, mean characters, and thought everyone else were the same as them. He had initially been unwilling to further weaken the strength of the celestial realm on the basis of his considerations of the storm of darkness, but upon further thought, what were these vile characters useful for? To be blunt, they might probably be the first batch of traitors when the storm of darkness invaded. There was no need to be polite, nor was there anything to be polite about. Ling Han strode forwards. Since you are unwilling to listen to nice words, I can only resort to force. Ha, brat, you've shown your true colors now, haven't you? The members of the Battle Dragon Palace all pointed at Ling Han. I've seen through your paltry tricks now, written all over their proud expressions. Ling Han didn't even bother to give them any regard. He strode forwards, his hands balling into fists, which he shot forwards. Pung, pung, pung. Not one of them was a match for him, and they were all sent flying with a single punch. Even if their cultivation levels were all at Mountain River tier, the advantage of Ling Han having cultivated to the 5th severance and having 9 divided souls would not be erased. It would only be weakened, but he would still be incredibly powerful. The heaven and earth were just pulling everyone's cultivation level to the same level, but because the heaven and earth were just, the heaven and earth also would not ignore the amount of effort that you had placed, cultivating to the 5th severance, forming 9 divided souls, and so on. Let's go. They continued climbing. Another 3 days later, the women were finally worn out and had to stop for a rest. They ingested some alchemical pills at the same time to replenish their greatly expended origin power. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Hunyo feasted. Their body arts were extremely brilliant and could be extraordinarily useful here because stamina could be recovered by simply eating, unlike origin power, which required absorbing spiritual qi. In this manner, they stopped and climbed and stopped, and about a month later, 18 branch paths had joined into one, and there appeared multiple massive rolling rocks ahead of them. A great many people were pushing these rocks up the mountain, and they were all covered in sweat, veins popping on their foreheads in their exertion. Some could not persist, and the moment they let go, their rolling rocks would instantly press towards them, pushing them down onto the ground and heavily rolling over them. Pung! The strange thing was the rolling rocks did not roll all the way downhill, but rather stopped bizarrely in a spot that was about 30 meters uphill of Ling Han, as if there was an invisible wall that had stopped their progress. It was naturally impossible that these people would be pushing these rocks for no reason. It had surely been a necessary choice. Let's give it a try. Ling Han walked further up the mountain, but immediately discovered that not only the rocks were blocked by an invisible wall, but he himself was too. He tried to push a rolling rock, yet discovered that this rock was actually capable of passing through that wall, allowing him to continue his progress onwards. However, this rock was too heavy, and he was immediately sweating profusely. Ling Han stopped after trying for a short while and returned the rolling rock to its position. Then, he tried to directly tear a hole through that invisible wall, but no matter what he did, it was all fruitless. Pooh! Someone immediately spluttered out in laughter. Idiot! Wasn't it obvious? Everyone was pushing rocks here. Did you think that they were all fools? Ling Han glanced at him, but did not speak. If they were to do the same as everyone else, how were they supposed to stand out from the rest? Of course, perhaps the only method was really to push the rock up the mountain, but choosing to go with the flow without even making his own attempts, how could this kind of person possibly have any future? In this place, Ling Han's 9 source powers of heaven and earth seemed to have entered into a deep slumber, and his divided souls naturally could not be released, either. He was not the only one. Hunyo and the Empress were the same as well, causing their battle prowess to be weakened to an unprecedented level. Thus, Ling Han was even less capable of breaking through this invisible wall. Hey, what are you glaring at me for? The person that had previously scoffed at Ling Han actually didn't give it up and shouted at Ling Han. What is it? Are you asking for a fight? Ling Han ignored him. It looked like the only way really was to push the rock up the mountain. The reason he wanted to find out if there were other ways was naturally out of consideration for the women. He feared that some among them would not be able to hold on. Then, not only would they be unable to advance into severing mundane tier, even their lives would possibly be at risk. Previously, he had seen some people being crushed by the rolling rocks, and they had directly died from the impact. Seeing how Ling Han was unwilling to even respond, that person naturally was mad with fury. With great strides, he rushed towards Ling Han. Pung! He had not reached him when he was sent flying with a punch from a green-robed young man. "Brother Ling," the green-robed young man greeted with a grin. Ling Han turned around and couldn't help but feel shocked as he replied, "Brother Yin." This person was actually Yin Xinlu. After entering this place, Ling Han had naturally regained his original appearance. "Haha, long time no see." Yin Xinlu clapped a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, then leaned towards him and whispered, "I have already joined the alliance, so please take care of me in the future, Brother Ling." Ling Han faltered. He had not thought that he would have been so fast, and had already managed to gather a group of people to him. He smiled widely and answered, "Of course." "That's right, Brother Ling. Just what level has your strength reached by now that you can make E submit willingly to you, and be so utterly impressed with you?" Yin Xinlu was extremely curious. He knew just how strong he was, but Yi's expression was filled with reverence when he mentioned Ling Han. This kind of expression appearing on the face of a monarch tier was an absolutely inconceivable matter. "Merely dividing soul tier," Ling Han said. "Oh." Yin Xinlu nodded, but was not overly surprised. Chapter 2186, Troublemaker. Chapter 2186, Troublemaker. Yin Xinlu himself was a dividing soul tier, but he had just advanced to the Yang soul. Thus, he estimated that Ling Han had to also be either a Yang soul or Yin soul, so it was natural that he wouldn't be too astounded. Of course, if he knew that not only had Ling Han formed 9 divided souls, he was capable of insta-killing even a third secret immortal palace tier, the expression on his face would definitely be filled with explosive shock. Ling Han was quite concerned about the matter of the alliance and asked, "Brother Yin, just how far has our alliance progressed by now?" "The flow is good," Yin Xinlu nodded first, but then he sighed. "However, there are a few troublemakers that are not so easily dealt with. They are not impressed by E, nor are they convinced by you, an alliance leader who hasn't even shown his face before, and are presently rubbing their hands, just waiting to defeat you when you appear so they can snatch the position of the alliance leader." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. In terms of battle, he had never feared anyone. Looks like the only way is to push the rocks up the mountain. There were rolling rocks everywhere here, and everyone could easily find one. Then, they would be pushing the rock up the mountain on their ascent. 1 step, 2 steps, and everyone was covered in sweat after only a while, and they all wanted to stop for a rest. But they were pushing a rock uphill. How could they possibly stop for a rest? They could either withdraw themselves and step aside, allowing the rock to roll back downhill, but they themselves would also be pushed downhill, or become exhausted and be crushed by the rolling rock. Even if they escaped death, they would still be severely injured. Only by gritting their teeth and forging onwards would they be able to successfully crash through this barrier. Everyone was aware of this fact, but there were often limits to human power. Once they had surpassed their own limits, their willpower would begin to give in. Hence, this was a test of willpower. They continued to climb the mountain, but their progress became slower and slower. Ling Han continued to cheer the women on. They had gone too long without battle, and their willpower naturally would not be too steady. Only their love for Ling Han was pushing them onwards, and Ling Han was also stirring up their love for him so that they would continue to forge on and stay determined. There could be a great many reasons for determination, such as a yearning for power, the motivation of revenge, and love. The women all forged on determinedly. The level of the severing mundane tier was too important, a dividing line between mortal and immortal. Thus, they had to be able to deliver a strike to the heaven and earth to advance to the severing mundane tier. Otherwise, even if they could become severing mundane tiers, what would be severed would only be their love for Ling Han. This was something that they would definitely not allow. Hence, this ignited an incredibly firm belief in them as they used their slender, delicate hands to push the rocks uphill, allowing sweat to soak them, yet still determined not to give up. Ling Han couldn't help but be impressed by the power of love. If it was hatred, one definitely could not possibly hold on for so long, but love was capable of it. 5 days, 10 days, and not one of the women gave up. All their eyes were firm and steady, as if they were completely transformed. Ling Han involuntarily nodded. It was no wonder that one could only leap over the dragon's gate after experiencing so many tests. That was because if they had not experienced this, how could firm willpower be developed? And how then would they be able to become supremely extraordinary geniuses? A determined person might not be able to become a monarch tier, but those that had become monarch tiers definitely had iron willpower. A month later, they suddenly felt their hands lighten. Those massive rolling rocks had actually vanished. They were first stunned, and then realization dawned on them suddenly. As it turned out, they had passed this test. Instantly, everyone slumped onto the ground, panting heavily. Their journey here was really too difficult. Ling Han looked at the women with gratification. Now that they had passed this test, it was as if everyone's spirits had been reborn. However, there are a great many tests still waiting for us. He raised his head and looked towards the summit, but still could not catch a glimpse of the summit. Who knew how far away it still was? That's right. How has Brother Yin come so quickly here? Ling Han asked casually. Oh, my master deliberately sent me here, Yin Xinlu said. However, one can only leap once over the dragon's gate. Multiple times would not have any effect, and my master has leaped over the dragon's gate 5 epochs ago. Thus, he has only sent me here this time, and has long since returned. What a truly good master. Ling Han nodded. Going by that logic, those celestial kings that were older than an epoch had probably already leaped over the dragon's gate, and would not come in and join in on the excitement here. If any celestial kings came here, their age would definitely be less than an epoch. To say anyone could become a celestial king, yet had not even leaped over the dragon's gate, who would believe it? Too bad. He had actually wanted to find a few celestial kings to beat up. What a coincidence. Yin Xinlu suddenly stood up and looked downhill. Ling Han's eyes followed his gaze and saw 3 young people that were presently pushing a rolling rock upwards each. Though they were all soaked in sweat, all their eyes were extremely bright, their fighting spirits soaring sky-high. Cheng Zixin, Fuzhou, He Xinjue, Yin Xinlu said, turning his head, revealing the names of these 3 people. Do you still remember how I said that there are a great many people that are not willing to submit to you as the alliance leader in the alliance? These 3 people are the ones causing the most noise. As they spoke, the 3 people had also passed this test and walked towards Yin Xinlu. Brother Cheng, Brother Fu, Brother He. Yin Xinlu clasped his hands and greeted the 3 of them respectively. Yet these 3 people were extremely proud and were completely aloof. They did indeed were qualified for it, because they were all Earth Souls and Monarch tiers as well. They would be able to suppress Yin Xinlu easily. You are, Cheng Zixin stared at Ling Han. Brother Fu, Brother He, isn't this person a little familiar? He, now that you say it, I remember. Isn't this our alliance leader, Ling Han? Fuzhou suddenly smiled. They had all seen Ling Han's memory image before. Indeed. He Xinjue nodded as well. Alliance leader Ling, how about a match? Fuzhou asked proudly. Even if there was a restriction to their cultivation levels, he was not afraid. In a battle of equals, even if his opponent was a celestial king, he was still confident of his victory. Prodigies were all prideful, and Ling Han could accept that. He stood up. Sure, then let's exchange a few moves. Fuzhou moved and launched an attack at Ling Han. Monarch tiers were monarch tiers. Even if their cultivation level had been restricted to the mountain river tier, his battle prowess still far surpassed that. His incredibly domineering punch shot forth. Ling Han parried the blow casually. Pong! Fuzhou's punch had landed on the palm of his hand, yet did not cause the slightest sound, as if all of its force had been swallowed up. Fuzhou showed a hint of surprise. Not bad, you do have some strength. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his arm lightly and sent Fuzhou backwards. Then, he pointed a finger at Cheng Zixin and He Xinjue. The 2 of you can fight me together. He Xinjue and Cheng Zixin exchanged a look, and both erupted into laughter. We have never had the habit of joining forces, nor is there any need for it, they each quipped. Fuzhou, meanwhile, was furious. With himself as the opponent, Ling Han actually dared to challenge Cheng Zixin and He Xinjue at the same time. Just how much was he belittling him? You are truly arrogant. He leaped back and shot out another punch at Ling Han. Ling Han paid him no regard, but instead charged towards Cheng Zixin and He Xinjue. He, too, shot out a fist, which turned into two punches that blasted towards the duo. Damn it! Both were enraged. They naturally disdained joining forces with another, but they could not bear such provocation from Ling Han, either. They both roared furiously and countered respectively. Pong, pong, pong. The three of them were instantly entangled in battle. Ling Han was confident he would be able to subdue these three people within 100 moves if there hadn't been restrictions on his cultivation level, even if he had still been an Earth Soul and had not formed 9 divided souls. But now that his cultivation level had been suppressed to the Mountain River tier, his advantage in battle prowess had also been endlessly reduced, so he could only battle Cheng Zixin and the others to a tie. However, Cheng Zixin and the others were shocked to death. Chapter 2187, Yield. Chapter 2187, Yield. 3 great monarch tiers were working together, and even then, they were actually only capable of fighting Ling Han to a tie. It should be known that the greater the restrictions on cultivation level, the smaller the advantage they would have as those who have attained the 5th severance and formed the strongest divided soul. For example, 100 was greater than 90 by 10, but everyone had been weakened 10 times. In that case, 10 was only greater than 9 by 1, and the advantage would correspondingly shrink tenfold. Vice versa, if the restrictions on cultivation level was lifted, then wouldn't Ling Han be even more heaven-defyingly powerful? Cheng Zixin and the others were all shaking their heads inwardly. Perhaps Ling Han was only a Yin soul, or even a Yang soul. In that case, without the restriction of cultivation level, any one of them would be able to easily suppress Ling Han. However, that was a matter for the future. At present, though, Ling Han was heavily suppressing them in a battle of 3 against 1, and no matter how they used various celestial techniques, it was of no help in this situation. They were all extremely resentful. That was because after their cultivation levels had been restricted, a great many celestial techniques were no longer usable, causing them to feel like they were tied up, which was incredibly horrible. However, they did not know that the person under the heaviest restriction was Ling Han. His strongest deadly attack was the Great Clash of Source Powers, but now all 9 source powers of heaven and earth had entered into slumber and could not be used at all. Otherwise, Ling Han would have been able to insta-kill all 3 of them with the first move. Yet Ling Han was completely unconcerned. He had already created his own path. The Great Clash of Source Powers was only one of his deadly attacks, and he would eventually give it up even if the 5 elements could all be improved to the level of the 9th Heaven Celestial King. It was useless. Ling Han's goal was the Heavenly Venerable tier, even if he managed to advance them to the 9th Heaven Celestial King level. So what? He definitely would not think of them as his true trump cards. He used Fists of Fury, and his aura immediately changed. It was as if he was a primitive emperor that had descended, exuding a domineering air that could suppress one and all. Cheng Zixin and the others all paled in shock. Standing in front of Ling Han, they felt very tiny, as if the latter could crush them to dust with a casual punch. For better or worse, they were still monarch tiers, so they hurriedly suppressed the fear in their hearts, burning their fighting spirit as much as possible, and going all out in battle. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The fighting spirit of this trio was worth recognition, and what he wanted was precisely this kind of talent. Otherwise, when they met with the storm of darkness in the future, wouldn't they instantly weaken and flee from battle when they saw how there were more numbers and more elites on the opposing side? He had the mind to make these 3 submit to him, and thus did not use his full power, and merely used Fists of Fury to suppress the trio. Cheng Zixin and the others were all shouting in fury, but it was completely useless. On the level of the Mountain River tier, Ling Han was invincible, and even if it was a 9th Heaven Celestial King, it would still be the same. After fighting for half a day, Ling Han suddenly stopped and asked smilingly, "How about it? Yield?" "No way." Cheng Zixin and the others all exclaimed. They were unconvinced and thought that it was the cultivation level that restricted their movements. Otherwise, how could it be possible that the three of them working together were still no match for Ling Han? Ling Han could see their defiance and thus said, "All right. Then, when we go out, we'll have another match." Cheng Zixin and the others looked at one another and nodded in unison. Though they were not convinced, they had completely acknowledged Ling Han's strength. In a battle of equal levels, they were no match for him, and there was nothing to say about that. "Brother Fu, Brother Cheng, Brother He, come, sit, sit, sit," Yin Xinlu said smilingly. He naturally was playing the role of mediator. Otherwise, with how these three people had just been beaten by Ling Han, how could they bring themselves to stay? Indeed, Fu Zhou and the others were initially planning to leave, but firstly, Yin Xinlu had spoken up and invited them, and secondly, they did need to rest and recover their energy. Thus, they nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground, taking out alchemical pills to ingest. However, they had just taken their alchemical pills out when their vision blurred. Ling Han had actually snatched their alchemical pills. "You," the trio stood up. "You've gone too far, haven't you? Do you plan on humiliating us?" Ling Han smiled and tossed out 3 alchemical pill bottles with a wave of his hand. "Use the alchemical pills I concoct." The three of them took the pill bottles, exchanged looks, and then doubtfully removed the cork of the bottle. After they poured out the alchemical pills, they immediately looked stunned. Primordial Heart Nurturing Pill. Ling Han nodded slightly. They recognized this kind of alchemical pill, as expected of monarch tiers. Primordial Heart Nurturing Pill, a 3-star alchemical pill, and even among 3-star alchemical pills, it can be ranked in the upper echelons. For those below Ascending Origin tier, this is the best alchemical pill for recovering origin power. Furthermore, it's a 6th refinement at that. The three of them spoke one after another, showing that they had considerable knowledge regarding alchemical pills as well. This was natural. Though they were not alchemists themselves, as cultivators, they had to have a very detailed understanding of alchemical pills as well. Otherwise, how would they know if they had made a profit or loss should they purchase an alchemical pill at the auction house? Or if they should obtain one in an ancient site, how would they know if it could be ingested? Why wasn't it a 4-star alchemical pill? Wasn't Ling Han capable of concocting such an alchemical pill? This was not Ling Han being stingy, but that 4-star alchemical pills were prepared for Ascending Origin tiers. And why was Ascending Origin tier called Ascending Origin tier? That was because the origin power in their bodies was soaring, turning into source power. If cultivators of the Immortal Palace tier or below ingested this kind of alchemical pill, they would definitely explode and die from the force. "You concocted this?" Fu Zhou asked in disbelief. Though this was only a 3-star alchemical pill, what did 6th refinement mean? Ling Han definitely had to be a 4-star alchemist. In terms of pure status, 4-star alchemist would definitely be superior to dividing soul tiers, and superior by an unknown amount at that. Ling Han smiled slightly and answered, "That's right." Gasp! Fu Zhou and the others all inhaled sharply, appearing incredibly stunned. "Fuck, are you even human? Not only are you a monarch tier, you are also an alchemist and a 4-star grandmaster at that. Monster. An absolute monster." However, it was also precisely because of this that the conflicted feelings that Fu Zhou and his group felt towards Ling Han decreased considerably. A 4-star grandmaster, and one that was so young, had extremely high hopes of advancing to become a 5-star alchemist. And once Ling Han became a 5-star alchemist, to say nothing of them, even celestial kings would be very polite upon meeting him. "Brother Ling." They paid their greetings to Ling Han again, and this time their manner was filled with sincerity, and they now considered him important. Of course, they had not been fully convinced yet. After leaving this place, they would definitely have another fierce battle with Ling Han again. Ling Han nodded and said, "Recover your vitality quickly. We still have to climb the mountain." They continued to recover their vitality, and after half a day, Fu Zhou and his group opened their eyes at the same time. They had completely recuperated. As expected of the Primordial Heart Nurturing Pill, and it's a 6th refinement at that. Merely a single pill is enough to help me recover practically all my vitality. And if it was our own alchemical pills, one would only help to recover about 30% of our power, and the more alchemical pills ingested, the stronger the immunity would be. Not only would its effects drop drastically, it would also leave behind alchemic poison in the body. The trio were all profuse with their praise. Previously, they had only known that this alchemical pill was good, but they had completely no knowledge of the extent of its benefits. They only knew after trying it out themselves. Let's go. The group continued their climb, and after journeying for a stretch, they discovered that the air was getting thinner and thinner, causing their faces to become incredibly pale, and their bodies to sway, practically about to pass out. After advancing into the flower blossom tier, cultivators would be able to fly in the skies and tunnel through the ground, no longer requiring ordinary food or even air to breathe. As long as there was spiritual chi, they could stay alive. Yet now, they actually felt difficulties in breathing. How could this not be extremely illogical? Clearly, this was another test from the heaven and earth. Hold on. Ling Han cheered the women on. If there was anyone that really could not bear it, he could only draw them into the Black Tower. He could not really allow them to die here, after all, right? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.